interest in the reports we've got to consider this evening. We do have a big agenda, lots to get through, but it's a good opportunity for debate in public. Just to remind you, of course, as part of our governance, all the cabinet members present play an active part in seeing these reports as they're drafts. So we're not seeing them tonight for the first time, and careful consideration has been given. That can reflect in the fact that often many questions have already been answered, but it's a good opportunity to discuss them in public and for people to come along and make public comments on them too. And we have a range of speakers this evening, including some councillors and some members of the public. Just start with apologies of absence. I don't think we have any apologies of for absence, do we? That's great. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. If I can ask if any members of the cabinet have any declarations of interest they need to make in any item on tonight's agenda. No. Okay. Thank you very much. Minutes to sign. We have two sets of minutes from our last meeting, which reflects the fact that we have the public minutes, and then there was a private session around some sensitive information that couldn't be shared publicly for fear of affecting the value that we could get in the procurement of a contract by sharing that information. Can I just ask if anybody has any amendments to those minutes? Lizzie, I think you have some comments to make.
Just a few minor comments. On page 12, under item 14, we talk about Northampton Forward Board, and that's chaired by Martin Mason. I thought for context, we ought to put who he is with, which is he's Chief Executive of Tricker Shoes. Further down the paragraph, there is a couple of typos. So third from the bottom of that paragraph, again, it is minor, but it's worth amending, which is would attend any meetings, not would attended. And the third point is on line 3 from the bottom, where it talks about the project being scrutinised by a quality surveyor. It's actually a quantity surveyor, which again is an important point. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Any further suggested amendments to our minutes? In which case, I'll ask, please, are they approved? Can we take those as agreed? Thank you very much. We have no specific chairman's announcements to make, or as far as I'm aware, any urgent business. But what we will do at that point is we have 3 public speakers registered, which are Parish Councillor Yvonne Swallow, Mr. Oliver Harris, and Parish Councillor Andy Miller-Chip. And if we may, then we'll take our public speakers. I understand if you'd like to come forward, Councillor Swallow. Is Councillor Swallow with us? Welcome. And it's item 16, I think you're speaking on, isn't it? Over to you. Nice to have you with us. And it's the button in the middle that make the microphone live for you. Might be easy if you want to sit. Please feel free to make yourself comfortable. Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Right, good evening. My name is Yvonne Swallow from Malton Parish Council. As you are aware, Malton Parish Council is against the development of a school on this site within the village. This site is in Malton, not Northampton, and it is Northampton that requires a new school, not Malton. We already have substantial traffic during term time through the village, an estimated 10,000 vehicles with traffic from a 3-form entry primary school, secondary school and Malton College, as well as nursery schools. Extra traffic from this new school for 1,200 students would increase this problem. The road on which the school may be built is a dead end with a small area in which to turn around. The A43 roundabout will already be seriously impacted by developments underway, i.e. the Aldi's store, which is under construction, and also the Saxon Park development. These will greatly increase traffic on the roundabout. This extra traffic from a new school will make the roundabout access very difficult. There are already several feeder roads on this roundabout, and a school would add to the congestion and make it extremely dangerous for pupils attempting to access the site on foot. Children walking to school from that area would have to cross a dual carriageway using the crossings that there are will impact on traffic on A43 at the beginning and the end of the day. And I can foresee long queues while children cross the road and traffic waits at the lights. One of the criteria set by the government for a new school is good transport and safe walking routes. The site at Wantage Farm does not, in my opinion, have these. The land at Wantage Farm was also designated Green Wedge Land in the Local Plan 2020. It is adjacent to Crowfields, the local nature reserve, which is owned by Malton Parish Council. We are worried about the ecological impact that this development will have on the ecosystem there. There have been over 21 species of butterflies seen and birds such as willow warblers, chiffchaffs, and others seen in the reserve, as well as many different plants and grasses. If West Northampton Council are prepared to lease the land for 125 years for peppercorn rent to the school, then please offer it to the parish council to maintain as an open green space. What would the admissions criteria be? As an academy, the school would be able to set its own policy, so we do not see how this would benefit Malton. How would WNC have any say in this? We still have doubts as to whether other sites in the Northampton NN3 area were properly considered. Malton is at the very northern end of NN3. Are you still investigating other sites? Many of the arguments against this location from your report show that things can be resolved at the planning stage. Surely this wastes time, as it is then found to be, if it is then found to be an unsuitable site, WNC would have to find another. I know there is a tight timescale for a new school to be found in Northampton, but Malton, which already has a secondary school within the village, should not have to suffer the extra traffic which will incur. It is disappointing that in your report you consider none of the concerns raised by residents or other stakeholders would justify not proceeding. However, Malton Parish Council look forward to being fully consulted during the planning process and also fully consulted during the 106 discussions. Thank you for listening to me.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have another speaker actually on the same item, and I think what we might do, given that, is then bring that item earlier in the agenda so that you have the opportunity to hear some of those points answered. Our next speaker is Mr. Oliver Harris. Mr. Harris with us? Welcome, Mr. Harris. The microphone looks like it's on and ready for you.
Thank you. I'm here tonight with Richard Bernard, Head of Northampton School for Boys, and Marcia Walker, Distinguished Trustee of the same. And we urge you to grant the lease of land at Wantage Farm as proposed. In 2018, NSB was encouraged to share the opportunities that its ethos provides for 1,600 students to many more Northampton children by becoming a multi-academy trust. We were presented with the future demand for school places and the Thorpeville site as the available location. We considered the size, the topography and the surroundings, and we consider it to be ideal in those respects. We submitted our proposals to the DFE based on these considerations. Of course, practical concerns over issues like transport and the impact on local residents matters to us. Whether children can get safely to the school, whether parents can get their children to school on time, and people can get where they need to at busy times. And the fact is that wherever in Northampton you place it, you cannot make a 1,200 strong school inconspicuous to those people who live nearby. There will be a need to make transport adjustments, and it's our fervent hope that for the sake of the children, the parents and the residents, that what can be done reasonably is done. For our part, we will do what we can to mitigate the travel issues. At NSB, children start to arrive from 7:30 in the morning. We will propose that the 700 eligible children, which the new developments will eventually yield, will be able to benefit from being part of the inner catchment area, maximising the numbers who walk to the school, and that girls and boys will be joined by their siblings, so helping to reduce the number of car journeys. We will see to it the environment of the school and the protected area which will be adjacent to it is cared for, and we hope that the local residents at least see the school and its playing fields as preferable to another housing estate, which seems to be the eventual likely alternative. You'll be aware that NSB's remarkable academic record, the success of its students in sport, music, dance and drama, and of its popularity with parents applying for school places. Just because NSB is highly regarded, we do not see it as a given that Northampton School will be the same. For this to happen, we will need the support of the community, of the people of Malton, and especially of this council. Not just by voting tonight to lease this land, but in the planning process and in delivering Northampton School on time. By ensuring that this school gets every support that can be given, you'll be helping to ensure that it has every chance of success. We will then do everything in our powers to make this an outstanding school in every respect. This is what the children of Malton and Northampton deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So we'll take that item first in a moment, but our last sort of public session speaker is in fact the Parish Councillor Andy Millerchip. And this is on item 11, I think, which is the consultation on the strategic plan. Over to you. Welcome.
Yep, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm here tonight because I wanted to contribute, if possible, to the discussion on item 11, which you have a spatial options consultation paper, which you are recommending for adoption as a consultation document. And I wanted to make some observations or even ask some questions that might contribute to that discussion. On a general observation or question I have, it seems that the strategy for meeting the housing need that's been identified is by presenting a range of 8 options for expanding Northampton further into the open countryside. And it just occurred to me that, is there another approach? Has the general principle been challenged that it has to be an expansion of Northampton through sustainable urban extensions? Or is there a way that you can share the burden throughout the whole district such that all of our communities would have to accept more houses within their community? So that's more of a general observation. I would link that with, if you publish a consultation paper that has 8 options, the consultation is going to focus on those 8 options. And would that mean that you are missing an opportunity for listening to further options? If you focus all the discussion on those 8 proposals that you've put in the plan. An area that I'm particularly interested in, because I'm a resident of Grange Park, is the option 1E on Appendix A, which is an expansion into open countryside to the south of Northampton. The area is outside of the Northampton, what's the area called? The
Related development area.
Yes, thank you. It's outside of that area, but it's there as a proposal. There has already been a planning application rejected for developing that land. That application went to public appeal. I actually spoke at that appeal, and the decision was upheld. The planning application was rejected. So that begs the question, should areas, parcels of land that have already had a planning proposal be rejected, should that now be going to public consultation for further consideration for development? Isn't that going to cause a lot of consternation amongst the public?
Some of the points that you're making, we'll raise these during the debate, and I can see Rebecca, who's a cabinet member, taking a lot of notes, and she'll comment on them. Some of it is, if you like, the stuff that's good stuff to feed into the consultation, Mr. Millerchip. Please carry on with your comments, but just I think that's the main point of that.
Okay, I am coming to the end. That is, I've made my main observations. Just a small bit of detail is on your map, the blue area for development in 1E actually swallows up Foxhill Country Park. So if that went out to public consultation, you might give the opinion that you're going to develop the park. which I don't think you want to do. Thanks for listening.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Might I suggest, while it's fresh in our minds then, that we jump across the agenda and get on with item 16. I know a number of people are particularly interested. We've had a couple of speakers on it. The main report in terms of it being a land asset and so on is with Councillor Longley, but we'll also then bring in Councillor Baker, I think, to comment on the educational and admissions side, although we've had some comments already. This is item 16, new secondary school, free school for Northern Northampton. Malcolm, do you want to talk us through the highlights of the report first of all, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think if others read the report, I'm not going to intend to go through that in any detail. It's all the facts are there as far as I can see. And what we've seen tonight, I think, two very eloquent speakers showing both sides of the argument for the school. So I'm going to. There's very little I can add to that, other than there has been another consultation, as you'll all be well aware. And my understanding is that it was surprisingly light in the numbers of responders. And so I'm going to say, Chair, that I don't intend to put any more to it then, because I think there might well be a debate here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Once we've heard from Fiona as well, actually, some of the comments were highways. Might ask Councillor Larratt Phil to chip in. And worth stressing that the three councillors for the Malton area, the West Northants councillors, made very strong representation, which led to us ensuring that we got some of the assurances that we've already heard from Mr. Harris in writing from the school, which we were thrilled to get, and also some careful highways considerations as well. From the education side, Councillor Baker, Fiona, over to you.
Thank you very much. As Councillor Nunda did say, that we did have consultation and an open meeting with with all of the West Northants councillors from that area, who put forward in a very good case for their concerns. We addressed many of them, and as the lady from the parish council said, we referred several of them back to the planning issues, which can be once you get to planning, things can be changed slightly to make things better. And I'm sure that the people will want to be doing that. I just want to say, really, just from my point of view, my job is to provide school places for our children. And I'm emphasising the fact that they're school places for our children. Nobody really, if they're honest, wants to have a secondary school near their back garden. It is a big culture change for everybody, but I think in the long run, you also get a lot of benefits from having the school close by. A really good school has been chosen. We could not have had a better school chosen to do this. We've managed to allay a lot of the fears about the criteria for taking children. That criteria is the same for all of the Northamptonshire County Council schools. It's now going to be the same for West Northamptonshire schools. The criteria is the same for admissions. It doesn't change. I know that their other school is boys only, but this one will have open for local residents to have places at this school, and then they will look for filling their spaces from children from elsewhere. So it is hoped, like the speaker from the Academy Trust this evening said, that a lot of local children will get access to school and be able to walk to school, and therefore cut down on the amount of transport that will be coming and going from the area. We did put on another consultation because the Department of Education had already done a consultation, which obviously seemed to pass most people by, and I understand that. It was done very quickly. So we did ask, if you recall at the last meeting where this paper was going to come forward, we pulled it out so that we could have more time for people to put their views forward. We've listened carefully, but at the end of the day, my job is to find school places for children. In September 2022, I need to find those places for children to go to school. This is going to be a very good school, very good trust running the school, and I don't think that you could have a better school if you were going to have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Just before we go to Phil, Matt, you're going to go, was a quick comment going to relate to what Fiona was saying there?
Pretty much, yeah. I was just going to say that it's fantastic to have the boys' school on board with this and to be put themselves forward to run this school. And I'm glad to see some of the representatives from the school here today. So I just wish them well. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yes. Highways related. Phil, you've done some work with local members and so on this, haven't you?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As you know, we've met with local members and yourself and Adam in order to discuss, as well as officers, in order to discuss the traffic and highways implications of this development, which are, to be honest, quite significant. We've got a road, a residential road that leads down to the school. And we want to keep the traffic flowing so those residents aren't inconvenienced. We've got issues with the junctions. We need to make sure that they're kept flowing as best they can and that we don't end up with congestion throughout Malton and leading on to the A43. As well as that, the access, which I think is important and we've got to look at very carefully in the design of the whole thing, is my concerns over young people crossing the A43 in order to gain access to the school, particularly if they're coming from the Eastern District of Northampton. What young people are like, unfortunately. They don't always follow the prescribed route, especially if they could save 20 yards by going a different way. So we really need to get the crossing facilities to get people on foot to the school. We need to get them right. But we do need to look very closely at what we do to ensure that the traffic flows. Mr. Chairman, you and I and Lizzie, for all intents and purposes on this one, have a very large school in our ward, which pupils come to from far and wide, and that's Northampton School for Girls. And they have a really well-designed, well laid out, significantly large car park. And I think you and I, Mr. Chairman, can say that we've never had any problems with regard to that. And Lizzie's there shaking her head. So I think there can be designs that overcome the issues that are of concern to myself and to residents and to local members. And I hope that we can take that into account in the designing of the car park to ensure that it is big enough to contain all the vehicles going into the site at one time. So we've got to be very careful, Chairman. We've got to design something that is fit for purpose and doesn't impede local residents. So that's the importance to me. And again, as I say, the crossing of the A43 has really got to be looked at as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Any other members, any comments? Stuart, did you want to come in there at all further on the highway side? Or are you happy with what Phil said? Yeah, please.
I know there was a question from Councillor Swallow in terms of the site analysis that took place. So again, if I may, Chair,
Please.
Just to articulate what's in the report again, and that this is a step in the process. So this is a lease which is subject to planning, and therefore there will be a lot of work, as Councillor Larratt has said, to look at the issues that have been raised by the members in regard to that. So this is a step in the process, and that at least would be subject to that agreement. But to give Councillor Swallow the comfort that this site has been chosen after a robust site assessment, which is referred to in the report. And again, more than happy to catch after this meeting and discuss that in more detail. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any further comments at all on this item 16? Okay, if I may, then I'll direct your attention back to the recommendations of the report. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to the order of our agenda. That takes us to item 6, and this is first two finance reports, Q1 revenue monitoring report. for the current financial year. This is Malcolm with you. Malcolm, over to you to talk us through this.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Chair. Well, the basic message is this is the first quarter and been a lot of settling down, all budgets being brought together. Not an easy task, and there's been some modifications gone along, but this is our first shot at the year end, which is the important number. And if you read through the report, you'll see that we're currently predicting a 1.6 million overspend at the year end. However, we did put in a 5 million contingency into the budget for things that we didn't, for bumps in the road that we didn't know, for the unexpected. So our intention is to eliminate that 1.6 million overspend by the half year, that is by the end of this month. And having done that, keep maintaining the 5 million contingency, hopefully all the way through to the year end. Now, what tends to happen in my experience anyway, of budgets for local authorities is that provisions are put in by officers, quite rightly so too, on what might happen. And they tend to fall out if they come out at all in the last quarter. So if we get it squared away by the half year, I think we can look forward to a decent year this year and hopefully a surplus at the end of it, at least the 5 million and maybe more. So it's a positive report. There's lots of detail here. I'm not going to bore you with, but if there's anybody who'd like to comment on it, I'm very pleased to answer anything best I can. Lizzie, what a surprise.
Yeah, it relates to page 19, report background number 5, where we talk about the 326.6 million budget, which was approved on the 23rd of February. The bit I wanted to highlight was the next bit, which is the budget includes 13.4 million of savings proposals. I think that term is misleading, and we have said this a number of times, particularly at NCC, because we're not making budget cuts. It's actually a productivity improvement process. And I think it's misleading, and I would really request from our finance team that we change the rhetoric and the name on that, because I think it doesn't explain what our budget is about in that area of transformation.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie. You're quite right. It is productivity. There aren't cuts, and I think that's worth noting. NCC's recovery was mainly based on productivity improvements, not on cuts. And we propose that any excess cash that we generate, assuming we do, will be reinvested in productivity and creating a virtuous sort of circle. That's the expectation. But first of all, we've got to get through the first year. First year will always be the most difficult because there's lots of unknowns. But once we've got the first year under our belts, then of course the second year we've got something to work on. We're actually starting the budget process for next year at the 1st of October. So we'll be right on top of that. But I'm delighted to say that I've got a very good team, very good team indeed. And we've got, I think we've come out of it very well. We seem to have got the best from Daventry, the best from NCC, and the best from South Northants. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the year, and hopefully I can give you good news. But certainly so far so good. That's the message.
Thank you, Malcolm. So we have 4 councillors registered to speak in the following order: Councillor Ian McCord, Councillor Danielle Stone, Councillor Judy Davenport, and then Councillor Emma Roberts. So first of all, Councillor McCord. Ian, over to you.
I was just particularly interested to know, really, the capital programme, where we are with the redevelopment.
That's next on the agenda, Ian. This is the revenue.
Yep, I'd say what we'll put you down for that though. We'll make sure that we've got a couple of councillors registered. I'll add you to that one as well though. Let's move on then to Councillor Danielle Stone. Danielle, over to you. Welcome.
Evening, thank you. So I read this report, and in fact I've discussed it with the portfolio with great interest, and it's pleasing that it's better than most of us were expecting it to be. So I'd like to congratulate everybody who's produced the report, but who's also actually been working at service level to make sure the budget is as sound as it is. very interesting figures in the general fund and for COVID-19. I'll come back to that in a minute. The bit that pleased me the most about this budget was reference to zero-based budgeting. We'll remember we discussed that at the budget setting meeting. I think it is really clearly very, very important. It's one thing having budgets, but it's another thing knowing that they're adequate. And what do you base that on? We need the evidence for that. Very interested in the discussion that's just happened about productivity. I think if we're making savings, we need to say they are savings. How they're done is a different matter. I think we need to be very clear when we're talking about that. And the reason why zero-based budgeting is really important for me is when we identify budget gaps, we need to know what we're going to do about that. So there's different ways of dealing with it, aren't there? We can cut services, we can cut staff, or we can mitigate the gaps by levering additional funding in. And that's the bit that really interests me. And of course, there's nothing in this to suggest that that is going to be part of our strategy, but I sincerely hope that it is. One of the questions I didn't ask when I had the meeting with the portfolio, I'm going to ask now, is where would we find details in the budget about the suspense account? And the reason why I'm asking that is because I think if we keep an eye on what's happening with the suspense account, it gives an indication of how effective and how efficient our operations are. So I'm really interested in that. In terms of contingency, I'm very curious about why you've decided to use some of the contingency to set against the highways overspend and not against the adult social services overspend. So if you could just give me some indication of the thinking around that, that'd be great. And then in terms of where there are monies to be spent, and certainly in terms of securing the best for the citizens of West Northants, then I really, really think we need to be looking at our investment to save strategy. And I would like to see more effort and around that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Did you want to comment on any of those points, Malcolm, at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to. First is, thanks, Danielle, nice to see you tonight. What we started off in NCC as I believe that politics into it is very important. So invited Danielle and also the Lib Dems, and I see Julie is over there in the corner. She's very welcome to attend as well. And once a month before these cabinet meetings, we tell them how it is, as the best of our ability. And we're very happy to ask whatever questions come to mind, and you'll get a straight answer as best we can. And we had a meeting the other day, and I think it was a successful one, I'd like to think. And so all of this lot here, there's nothing new here for Danielle. Few thoughts since, I think, but thanks very much. Regarding the suspense account, you're open to come and view that anytime the fancy takes you, Danielle. There's no secret about it. And if you've got any good ideas, then let's have them. Okay. The contingency went from highways to not adults. I've got a clue. I can't think of that offhand, but I've got a guy up there who probably can. So I think, Martin, you can answer that much better than I can. But other than that, we'll continue this approach, Danielle and Julie over there in the corner, and Jonathan from Lib Dems. And so you'll hopefully never get a surprise. We'll see.
Thanks, Malcolm. Did you want to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. So on the suspense account to balance sheet account, so that's the reason why it's not involved in this report. So we can give you, as Councillor Longley says, details on that, and more than happy for you to come in and have a look at any of the accounts or the records of the books that we've got and scrutinise them as much as you want to. So more than happy to accommodate that. In relation to the contingency for highways and why that was brought in specifically, when there was a specific issue that was highlighted at the end of the budget process when we were formulating the budget plans and putting them together. And it was to do with how the budget disaggregated on highways between West Northamptonshire and North Northamptonshire. Now, right at the death of that budget process, we received some extra information literally on the day of publishing the reports, The first consideration is, do we take that into account in the budget? It's information we're aware of, so we did. So we need to build that £2 million into the budget. But because we still need to do some specific scrutiny on that and make sure we're comfortable with it, instead of putting it into the highways budget, we dropped it into contingency to be held there until we did that piece of work, and to also see, once we got into the new financial year, if that particular pressure would come to pass. Course of the way through the new financial year, that particular pressure has come to pass. We specifically had an element in the contingency for that pressure, so we've drawn that across. And that's the reason why I've pulled that in, rather than any other general contingency, because it was specifically there for that purpose. In respect of your third point on investor save schemes, always more than happy to consider investor save schemes. I know the Councillor Longley is very happy to support that as well. So, you know, if we can put cash up front, which would deliver ongoing savings, then absolutely have to consider those.
Chair, forgive. I thought the report was really well written, actually. So a lot of the questions that I hadn't thought of when I had the meeting were actually answered within the report anyway. So thank you very much for that. One of the questions for me was about vacancies in your team. You know, I'm very wary of underspend. You know, I've got used to underspend pressures, actually. So I'm just wondering how you're dealing with the, you know, thank you for reporting on it, but how are you dealing with the vacancies, and is that affecting the work?
Is there something you're able to comment?
I think I'll give you a little bit of a cynical view to start with, if I may. Where there's a genuine vacancy, we should be filling it. And in fact, we identified some earlier on this afternoon where we're actually going to ship some people over to help out because there's a genuine. But with respect to all the officers, you know, a vacancy isn't always a vacancy. You could call it contingency. So you've got to be very sure that, in fact, it's a genuine requirement. And as a consequence, then that's the case, then it absolutely should be filled. But you will tend to find the term we tend to use in, well, we used to use it in industry anyway, is sandbagging. And, you know, and we want to be aware of that. So you'll find some of those vacancies aren't necessarily required. Some will be, and it's getting the wheat from the chaff here. So that sort of, hopefully that answers your question.
Do you want to answer that, Martin?
I was just going to add to that in terms of the process that we take. We have the finance team go out and spend time with the service areas and make sure that the projections that are coming forward, people have been encouraged to fill them so there isn't an impact on services. But those detailed discussions take place between the finance business partners and the service leads, the service areas.
Thank you, Martin. Next speaker is, in fact, Councillor Julie Davenport. Julie, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Malcolm, I was thinking, where's Malcolm when you need him? Because I was going to ask you that very question, is could we please have those meetings? Because then any questions I have got, because it's a huge, you know, the reports we read, and it's all jumbled up in my head and I try to get it, but it's just easier when you have. Now, as far as this is concerned, when the budget was made, we knew that we were in the middle of COVID and we didn't know when it would be over. And I would have thought that would have been factored in more because, and I could be wrong here, the fact that what concerns me is that the COVID funds that we are now using, which were ring-fenced, how did they become unring-fenced? I don't know. And if we can do that with COVID, can we do it with other ring-fence? Oh.
So that one straight. Some are ring-fenced and some are not. And what you're looking at there.
No, and I do understand that. It's just that the information,
Anybody that wants to look at it, it's page 29 of the report.
yeah, no, I've seen that. But previously, I know that the comp and the test and trace, that they were ring fenced. There was also a huge amount, well, huge to me, several million, that was ring fenced. But that seems to not be ring fenced anymore.
Julie, we would never go against, if it's ring fenced, it's ring fenced. Unless
Okay.
anybody knows to the different, and then that's certainly not the case. I would be amazed if that was the case. And I'd be very irritated if that was the case.
Well, it was, I sent an
If
email.
if you do have information, then please take it to
Brilliant.
Marshall
Yes,
myself
I
and
have.
we'll
I've got
deal with
an
it.
Email. Yes. Okay. So that was that. Just because, and also on here, it says that COVID is not being accounted for within this, the funds that we have. However, it is being shown as management actions, several million at the moment, and there's nothing here about children's on page 37. So are we also giving COVID funds to balance out children's, and if so, how much? Because I was hoping that the COVID funds would, because we've got a lot of reserves, people keep saying, I keep being told that we're okay. And I was hoping that those COVID funds would be used for local businesses that are going through a really tough time.
COVID funds will be used for COVID purposes. But if you have a need and you've then an idea, then we're very pleased to hear it and look forward. But they will always, and if it's a business that's been affected by COVID, clearly they could well be up for a handout. But we did distribute 2.8 million to small businesses, all those that just a couple of weeks ago, just in fact by the end of August, if I remember correctly. And in order and having done that, we then attracted an input of 3.4 million. So we spent 2.8 to get 3.4. So it worked out well. Had we not spent that, we wouldn't have got the 3.4. But that was all to businesses in the locality, if they applied.
But just to chip in there, actually, Julie, you and I had a conversation about some other purposes, which we won't mention now, but I would like you to know that we are making some progress on some of those ideas. I don't know if that's what's in your mind.
Well, it
there.
is because, you know, I'm just concerned. So is this the several million so far, and children's, I don't know how much of COVID's being used. Has that got to come out?
A point there is we would not use the COVID fund to support the revenue account unless it was COVID related.
Yeah, has to be
but
quite
it's
strict.
got here, management action, assumed use of non-ring fence COVID grant. And then you've got 4 million for adults, and then you've got 3 million nearly for place, economy and environment. So that has been, and I just didn't know what was happening with children because it's zero here.
Couldn't tell you specifically on the detail, but what I can tell you is the principle is that if it's COVID related, not a problem, and we'll be audited on this.
And Martin, I think he's going to clarify a little more on this. Martin, would you like to say a couple of words on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's lots of different funds for COVID. Some are ring fenced, some are described as COVID, but actually are unring fenced. So within this report, you've got reference to a number of them. There are many different COVID funds that are being given to us by the government. There is an extremely detailed spreadsheet, which is probably about this long, which has got all of those different grants detailed on there, which I'm more than happy again to share with you, Councillor Davenport, so you can see the amount of COVID funding we've got coming in. In terms of what's being put into the budget for this financial year for 21-22, there's £12.5 million worth of our budget has been dedicated to COVID, to deal with COVID for this financial year, funded through one-off funds that came in from the government. We also have the COM funding, which you referred to earlier. The COM funding is ring-fence funding and strict eligibility and criteria in terms of how that can be used. So we deal with that separately, we monitor and manage that separately. You then have the unring-fence grant funding that we received last year in the predecessor authorities, and any of those unallocated balances then have been carried forward into this financial year. It's called COVID funding. It's part of the funding that's referred to in table 6 on page 29, which I think is the figure you referred to. it's earmarked for COVID, but actually it's described as an unring-fenced COVID fund because you don't strictly have to use it for COVID. The intention is to use it for COVID, but it's referred to as unring-fenced when you get into the detail because it is distinctly different to the very the comp funding, for example, where you have very clear eligibility criteria in terms of how you can use that. When you come into the point you made about adults drawing down some of that funding of £4 million and place drawing down some of the funding of £3 million, why haven't children's done the same? It's happened in adults in place because within those areas they've identified expenditure which is eligible to be funded using COVID funding, highlighted that, so we've used the COVID funding for that. We haven't had the same from Children Down for Children's.
Okay, I would like to see a list of where different monies have gone to, and I'm sure other councillors would, to get a better understanding of it. And this in drawn down has that non-ring-fenced COVID funds that are listed in here.
Okay.
Depends on, it entirely depends on the purpose.
Sorry.
Entirely depends on the purpose.
Right,
If it's
yeah.
ring fenced and it's been used for what is ring fenced area, fine. And if it's not, then.
No, the unring fence.
Judy?
I'm just trying to find out whether this 7 million that has come from non-unring fence COVID is already been taken out of the unring. So I know how much have we got left of unring fence.
We'll get you an answer for that, Julie. I
Thank
think, forgive me, one thing we're really keen, particularly on the financial stuff, is to make sure we get a debate.
Sorry.
So we're going way beyond the 3-minute speak and then move away. But there's some stuff you can email there, questions, Malcolm will chat,
Yeah.
no problem at all. If we may, let's move on to our final speaker, if you don't mind, which is Councillor Emma Roberts. While Emma's coming up, Lizzie, you're going to make a quick point there, were you, or is that one gone?
Just very quickly, just to say that we're exploring all avenues as far as helping businesses in West Northants get back to where they were pre-COVID. So we're looking at all options at the moment.
Thanks, Lizzie. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly on that, the COVID situation, we referenced a concern about the way it was described within the budget at the budget setting position previously, because everything is lumped under COVID. And it looked like in that budget that everything was having a COVID term attached to it. And I think that debate that has just occurred, it kind of shows that that's a problem. And I will, for one, would like to see that broken down into more detail as well. On the overspend, I specifically wanted to look at the adults overspend. And I was concerned, and I don't know whether you can allay that concern. There's not really a lot of detail around what the care sector are calling the forthcoming crisis that comes up as about of the mandatory vaccination situation. I'm not clear from the report and the items that are listed on page 37 that we've really considered what that crisis would be. And I'm concerned that the overspend that's detailed there doesn't look at how this will be impacted. I echo Councillor Stone's commentary around the vacancies position as well. And I just wondered what we're doing to deal with those vacancies and whether or not we're ensuring we're a competitive and desirable employer, or is that the problem? I don't really accept Councillor Longley's position about whether they're real vacancies or not. If they're showing us vacancies until a job evaluation or assessment has been done on those vacancies, then they are vacancies. So I think we have to have that conversation openly and probably involve trade union colleagues with that. But those were my initial concerns.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody like to comment or respond to any of those points? Or Matt, were you going to come in on the adults?
Yeah, I was going to mention a couple of things anyway. I think the report shows a 0.6 forecast overspend in adults, which is a variance percentage of only 0.55%. And obviously the report shows the financial position in this year. So it hasn't dealt with any impact yet of those issues around the care and the vaccination. situation, which I know us as a cabinet, we've had very detailed updates, and I do as well, and I'm sure Councillor Roberts does in her conversations with the director. But I'm assured in terms of that we are doing everything we possibly can to help the sector and to mitigate any impact on the care we're providing, the assistance we give the private sector as well, and indeed you know, the staff that are involved. So I'm very satisfied that we're doing everything we possibly can. I can perhaps offline get some updated figures to Councillor Roberts on the very current situation, because I got an update on that today, which I don't think it'd be right to share it publicly, but I'll be happy to share those with Councillor Roberts. But as my overall comment was going to be along the lines of Councillor Longley, that the Adults, Communities and Wellbeing Directorate is the biggest budget in the whole council. So I'm very keen to keep a watchful eye on it. I have regular updates, obviously, with the director and the assistant director who's responsible for delivering against the budget, and I'm satisfied despite the pressures. And we've got to take into account that you know, this has been an unprecedented time. Not only have we put this new council together and the huge amount of work that went into that, but we've done that dealing with COVID and the pressures that this particular directorate has been dealing with. So I'm satisfied that you know, the directorate has got the right grip, the right watch on it. And again, I'll be happy to share some of the extra detail with Councillor Roberts offline. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And I think that's the last of our speakers on that. Malcolm, did you want to make any other closing comments at all? Are we ready to go to the vote, the recommendations?
No, I just reiterate, I thought this is, bear in mind, we've been feeling our way. This is just the first quarter. Half year will give us a better view, and the year end, of course, will be what it'll be. But the signs are encouraging. So the message is, so far, so good.
I was moving us on there, Emma. Was there another comment?
Sorry,
you wanted?
Chair. No, there was two specific questions. There was a specific question around the vacancies, and I commented on Councillor Longley's comment, but I also asked what we were doing to deal with those vacancies, and how we were ensuring that we were that competitive and desirable employer. And I think Martin was nodding at me. I don't know who's going to answer it, but I would,
Sorry, Martin.
I would like to
jump in over the
understand
comment?
where we are with those.
I think I'll just reiterate what I said earlier in terms of if there is a service pressure, if there are vacancies, the services are going ahead to try to fill them so it doesn't impact on service provision. Is there a particular market pressure I'm seeing in my particular area within the Finance Directorate? Not at this point in time, but obviously it's something that we keep a close eye on. If market pressures do emerge, then there's other tools that we can consider to try and address that. But certainly speaking for my area, the Finance Directorate, we're not seeing that to a great extent at this point in time. A little bit of it, but not to a great extent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, once again, so Malcolm was directing our attention to the recommendations. Can I just ask if you can indicate your agreement to those recommendations, please? Is that agreed? Great, thank you very much indeed. And staying with Malcolm, we move on to capital monitoring. So if you want to introduce the report,
Yeah,
then as we know, we've got some speakers, Malcolm. Over to you.
Yeah, right. Very brief on this. Again, this is the first quarter, I have to recall, and there's been a lot of sorting out. There's been quite a tricky quarter on the capital because we've had the three, the borough, well, Forgas coming across, and all different budgets, all with different demands. And it's going to take quite a bit of sorting out this year to see what we can and cannot afford. And the devil is always in the detail on capital. And so I'm going to leave it at that, because there's not a huge amount that we can go forward on here, other than what we've tried to do is set up the arrangements and the various boards that go through the capital. And we will spend more time in the second quarter. In fact, we're doing it now. So in the second quarter report to show where we expect the year end to sort out. But there are, just to give you an example, there are 122, I think is the right figure, projects that were brought over from the other authorities. So you've got to understand them for a start and work through them. So I think I'll leave it at that. Those that want any detail on anything specific, because there's a lot of it, the detail, then please contact myself outside of the meeting, and I'll do my best to tell you where we stand on that particular project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. So we've three speakers. We've Councillor Daniel Stone, Councillor Judy Damport, and Councillor Ian Cord. So welcome, Councillor Daniel Stone. Back, Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. I've got three questions, Malcolm, if that's okay. I've never seen this before where we pay the 106 and SIL money in advance of receiving it. I've known us hoard the money, but I've never known us lend it quite in the way that you're saying on page 50. So I suppose the question there is, what kind of risk is attached to that? I think, and will that appear on the risk register? I suppose I would ask around that. The other thing is, it's quite understandable with COVID and lots of other things, Brexit even impacting on supply chains, that a lot of capital development has been rephased. I think it's a bit regrettable though, but I just wonder again what the risks associated with that are in terms of mounting costs. Are there inflationary pressures there? I'm aware, for example, that building materials is a lot more expensive this year than they were 2 years ago. So I'm just wondering, you know, what the consequences of rephasing are going to be for the budgeting, and whether that's going to be looked at. And then the third question is about assets. I'm really interested in whether we've got a disposal policy, I think, and how that's going to be constructed across the three areas, South Northampton, Daventry and Northampton, because I think the councillors in all those areas, as well as the residents, will have a view, won't they, which may not sit well with what the officers think. So it's about how we take into account the views of people closer to the ground when we're making those kind of decisions. And also in terms of making those decisions, what I would want to see going alongside that is some strategy for how we're going to be building community hubs, community resilience, social capital in our areas. Because one of the things that I'm worried about, to be honest with you, is us disposing of something 1 year and then next year thinking, oh my God, we could have really used that for this. So I think there needs to be a bit of work done in terms of trying to develop those two strategies and matching them across. But the other thing is, I think it would be, I'm sure you must have it because of all the work that has been done in integrating the authorities, whether you've got an asset list and whether that's accessible to members, because if it is, I think we'd all find quite a lot of comfort in being able to have a look at it and see exactly what is going on in our, you know, what is being used, what isn't ever going to be used again, you know, what the voids look like, what the disposals might look like. I think we need to have a bit of a handle on that.
Okay, Malcolm, some points there, perhaps.
Yeah, fine, thanks. I'll talk about the rephasing and the risks with building materials. Absolutely right. I mean, and that seems to be going ever upwards. And what tend to happen if it's a fixed price contract? The risk there is that the builder or whoever it is goes bust, of course. So that there is a risk when prices are increasing like that, and very dangerous one. But what it does tend to do is that if the prices have gone up, then of course some of the projects get reevaluated. So you know, it's bad news all round. You know, it's no good news there. As regards the assets, we're very fortunate this evening as we got Simon with us. I worked with Simon for many years on asset, and there's nobody better as far as I'm concerned in that area. So as far as the assets disposal and the asset list, Simon, would you mind having a word or two on that?
I would not claim at this stage it is as robust and as complete and as understandable as I would like. But Malcolm already has a copy. We're happy to share that with other members, and we're continuing to work on the process of making sure that that list is as accurate as possible. Likewise, there is a process for disposing of assets. Obviously, any significant disposals will come to this forum for approval, or potentially to council, depending on the scale of it. Smaller assets are disposed of under delegations because it's simply impractical to take all those decisions here. But there is consultation with the portfolio holder, board members as appropriate. So I think we can safely reassure you that we're not going to dispose of something and then say, we really wish we kept it.
Thank you, Simon. And I'm going to cop out on the first one too, because I don't know about the 106 payment. Martin, can I come to you on this one?
Yes, on the section 106 and the seal payments, I think the point to make about this report, it's doesn't begin to do monitoring just yet. It sets the framework and it sets the process, and it describes how we put the capital programme together, decisions that were taken in predecessor authorities from when the capital programme was set up until now, and any new decisions that have been taken this year. And I think when we look at that comment on page 50, the footnote to table 6, that's talking about predecessor schemes that were already in place, which we inherited. So those schemes had already started, where decisions have been taken in predecessor authorities to forward fund some of those schemes. And then when the seal comes online, when the section 106 comes online, that repays that upfront forward funding. So that's not a new approach we've taken in West Northamptonshire Council. It's an approach that we've had to adopt because we inherited those schemes. Is there more risk in those schemes than ordinary schemes? I would say yes, there probably is, but I think it's something we're just going to have to manage and keep a close eye on.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks very
Chair.
much. Right, two more speakers on this one. Councillor Julie Davenport is next. I'm just going to quick review of the time. We've done 3 items in an hour, so we've got another 4 hours work at that basis. So I'm urging people to be slightly more concise, if I may. Julie, you're next as a public speaker, I think, on this one. As a speaker on this one.
Wanted to ask about Old Lion Court. And the reason I ask about that is because I thought after Angel Square, it was decided that we would scrutinise all major builds. But Old Lion Court is in my ward. I knew nothing about it until still for sale sign up that she tried to buy an apartment there and they said, no, they've all been sold to the council. Now, maybe I missed that meeting. So it's not only this, it's with all the other builds. It would be good if we could have some scrutiny, because it just seems to be that things happen. And as the ward councillor, I don't know whether Councillor Roberts was involved in Old Lion Court.
We could probably deal with that one by email, Julie. You're referring to the new development by the river?
Oh, I know where it is. I've been there.
Yeah, I'm asking if that's the one it is. Is that Old Lion Court? Is it the one next to the river?
It must be.
Yeah,
'cause
proposal was for the council to buy. A private owner has bought it, I think, instead. If you want to email on query like that, we'd gladly give you an answer.
Yeah, I only found this out last night. So I thought I'd ask, because I thought I would ask about the, just about scrutiny, just an idea. We decided at NCC we would do that to major builds, and it would be a good idea. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So a final speaker on this one, Councillor McCord. Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm struggling to see where we're at with the redevelopment of the Spawn Arcade, or the old co-op site just across the way in Toaster. Can't see anything in the capital programme. Can't see anything anywhere. Can you give me an update?
Update on that? I'm not able to answer off the top of my head, but will gladly look into it. Stuart, aren't you, Martin?
I think we're going to have to give you an update, Ian.
Oh, he's gone. Go on, Stuart. It's not too late, though. It's not too late.
Yeah, so where we're at with that particular project is we're working up the scheme at this moment. We then will present that to the Capital Assets Board in terms of looking and ensuring that we've got the financial in place to make that happen. So that's the new rigor that we've got into the system, that things don't appear on the capital programme until it's been through that rigor, and we've got that oversight in terms of project management and the costs, etc. at that stage. So you will see that on the list quite soon, I think, Martin.
Yeah, Martin, you're going to comment too, I think.
Yeah, so just a point of clarity, you won't see it on the capital programme at the moment because the decision that was taken at the time was to fund it through revenue because it was primarily demolition costs. So there's a revenue fund for it for the majority of that scheme. The plan is actually to bring that whole scheme into the next capital asset board. I don't know when the date of when that meets, just to consider that specific issue to ensure that the funding that we've got in place, there is a small bit in the capital programme, but the majority is sat in revenue, is enough to actually fund the scheme and the plans for it. So that's due to go into the next capital assets board.
That maybe answers as well to Julie's point about scrutiny. If you have a detail, a specific, and it's going through the capital board, that is the time when the scrutiny takes place. And it either gets okayed or not, or modified, or whatever the outcome may be, and it would then be finalised and come forward to hear if appropriate, or delegated authority, as Simon's just explained. That's the current system.
Okay, very comprehensive answer, I think. So any further comments or questions from Cabinet on this report at item 7? In which case I direct your attention to the recommendations, please. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, this takes us on to item 8, and this is the corporate plan performance report. You will be aware that we published our corporate plan extremely quickly, 17 working days of the election. And as a consequence to which we're now starting to measure performance against that corporate plan. It reflects the priorities of the council and indeed the administration's promises to the electorate in its manifesto. So this is the first of those reports. It will be an evolving list, and we'd welcome some comments this evening for those things that might evolve onto the list. It obviously deals with many services which are coming together from 4 different councils. In some cases, they're district services, so 3 different councils. So the information for collecting those reports is coming together. These are new processes for doing that. Many of them are new measures. We felt that measuring against our promises in the corporate plan was the correct thing to do. And so this list is quite brief in terms of what we're reporting, but we think these are some of the key things. The report as presented, although Matt did want to comment, you wanted to comment specifically on some of the figures that appear against some of your areas, Matt.
I'm happy to, Chair. Yeah, well, I was just going to say, as you just highlighted, this is the first report, and I was just going to comment on priority to improve life chances. That section there, and at the top, it just to draw everybody's attention to it, does say, please note that most of the data is not available at a West Council level at this time. So these are very high level figures, mainly around for the whole of Northamptonshire. I have been assured after asking the questions on, I'm sure some opposition colleagues will probably ask the same questions on, okay, well, what are we doing about all these figures? We've got a bit more granular around, you know, the impact on West Northamptonshire. There are some very good bits of performance in there, things like smoking cessation. There's a Stoptober program starting soon. There's been some good performance on that. There's going to be places put up in around some of the different towns in the Grosvenor Centre in Northampton. And but if anybody is interested, I've got a whole list of commentary. High level don't look particularly great, but I can assure everybody that there are some really good bits of improvement in there. And of course, there's been the impact of COVID as well. So it's a challenge, but you know, these are about delivering on our priorities, and I'll be pleased to hopefully provide some more granular detail and progress around some of this stuff as we go through and report each quarter. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Matt. That's great. A couple of speakers on this. First one is Councillor Emma Robertson, then after Councillor Dennis Meredith. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start what I'm going to say with a full appreciation that this is an interim or an early days report, and that hopefully it will progress into something with a lot more detail. But I do have a few concerns about content and a suggestion for an additional piece of data for May. So the first one is around priority 1, green and clean. We're detailing net trees planted as an item for consideration. I think it will be hugely important that we consider trees removed and also planting in situ or replanting in situ as part of that process, because we can plant as many trees as we like, but if we've taken as many out, then the net gain is zero. So
This is net.
yeah,
This is trees planted minus trees removed. So this is.
but there is no detail of the number of trees removed within the report.
Okay.
It's not there. It doesn't give the figures.
Right.
It just gives the outcome.
Okay. Okay.
So it doesn't detail where they're being removed from, whether replacement in situ is there. And I think that's really important as a part of the ongoing working items around the tree policy. We're going to have that detail to show that we are green and clean. So I would like to see that information. Maybe it's not in here, but maybe it's detailed elsewhere, as in that's where it needs to be shown, but it needs to be provided. And then taking on to priority 2. And I know that some of the figures are old and we're not looking at all of the data. And we're above target on percentage of all referrals with a decision within 2 working days, but there's a significant drop, am I understanding that correctly, since April? So again, the answer may not be here, but I think we need to be getting an answer to that. There's also the percentage of children that became the subject of a child protection plan for the second or subsequent time is quite high versus the bench. And I could go on improved life chances were 6 under bench. We're looking at old data, but how long are we going to be looking at old data for? And what is our opportunity then, Jonathan, to then pull that back in and ask further questions about that? Appreciate we can do it at scrutiny, but it feels like there's not a lot of detail or info here. And I understand Councillor Golby's comments about he's got information about the next steps and things are better than is shown in this report, but we can only comment on the data that we've got in front of us, and it doesn't make for good reading. And we've had a few instances where we're saying West Northants data isn't available yet, West Northants data isn't available yet. So when is West Northants data going to be available as part of that process? And I just think that I've been asking Jonathan since July for the Children's Services, the Children's Trust scrutiny elements to be documented in more detail, and we might have been able to get a handle on some of these items if that had happened, and we haven't got those briefings in place yet, neither for opposition or all members. So I'd really like to move that forward now if we could.
Yeah, we have put quite a lot of time to discussing that, and you're right. These are meetings that we've had with good intentions to move ahead with them. So you're quite right. We need to get those sorted quickly. So does anybody on any of those service areas, some of it was children's, any thoughts occur to you off the cuff, Fiona, or do you want to consider some of the points that Councillor Roberts has said, or comments at this point? Entirely up to you.
No, I know the scrutiny plans are in place. They're in their contract. There is a number of scrutiny times that they attend scrutiny, and the dates I've had actually came this morning for approval, so that will be coming to us. And I'm in the process of arranging, just for your satisfaction, well, everybody's satisfaction, a member briefing with the Chief Executive of the Children's Trust on the Ofsted report, so that you can all come along and ask your questions of him directly, rather than me giving you a second-hand version of it. I thought much better if he does it himself and you can ask him directly. This will help overcome some of the sort of at arm's length that perhaps people are feeling about the trust. So that will be coming. I've just reminded him this evening about a date, so that will be coming very soon in the next couple of weeks.
Chair, if I may, and thank you, Councillor Baker. Maybe there's a missing link in the loop there, but we've had these conversations and we've agreed a series of briefings that need to be provided. I was told that you were going to be informed of that information. Apologies on someone else's behalf if you haven't. Colin was very keen that the 3 items or the 3 instances that can come into scrutiny for the Children's Trust weren't sufficient for us to monitor what was happening. So there's an update been requested at People Scrutiny on the Ofsted report for the scrutiny for the 21st of September. So hopefully it's on the agenda. So I hope that will be there before the all-member briefing, and perhaps you and I could have a chat and see if we can work out where the gap's gone wrong. Maybe you can fix it for me as well. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you. Was that the last of your points, Emma? Okay. Next speaker is Councillor Dennis Meredith. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you, Leader, for giving me the opportunity of speaking. I'm here today regarding a very serious thing, which I'm asking you councillors to look at. It's about the Fraser Road development for Northamptonshire Partnership Homes to build 125 houses on the park of Falklands Brook Park. I noticed today there's a planning application that has gone forward for consultation. This planning application is illegal. If this application goes to the planning committee, then I'm afraid the council will be having to have some illegal responsibility for allowing this. I did have a.
Dennis, I'm sorry.
No, I've got to finish. It's important. I've had 1,000 residents.
It might be important, but it's not in any way related to the
Well, it's
item
the
that we're
only
discussing.
chance, Jonathan, it's the only chance I can get to talk to councillors on this particular
Well,
subject.
no, it's not, because you and I have had a discussion. Look, I'll be absolutely honest. We bend over backwards
I
to
knew
make
this
sure
was
that
going to
people have their say at these meetings. We don't limit them for 3 minutes. We allow them to enter into a dialogue, but to come up and talk about something that's completely different, not on the agenda, is a bit of an insult to these people who like to be saying till 10 o'clock at night.
It's not even being discussed, is it? It's not even being discussed. I had an email from Catherine Whitehead to state that the area was a covert and that they couldn't build their houses on it. And yet that has been totally ignored.
Can we get a view from you, Catherine, on where we're going with this? Just to be clear, we have an important decision to take, a matter that's not been publicly advertised on the agenda. If the public felt we were taking a decision or having a comment on something that they had not advertised, they'd have the right to be cross at us. So just ask Catherine to steer us, Dennis, and I'd like you to pay attention to Catherine's view, and bear in mind that you and I have had discussions on this issue. Catherine, over to you.
That's absolutely correct, Chairman. We can't allow you to discuss an item that's not on the agenda. We are obliged by law, as you know, to publish any item that we're going to discuss. There's also the fact that there will be other members here who may need to determine this when it comes to a planning matter, and they cannot take part in this meeting.
That's fine. You've made your point. I will change tact. I will say that, which is in the corporate plan, that my particular area that I represent has been the most neglected area by the administration. And it's a very serious thing for people. They're saying that there's no places for people to go and for people to do. And yet we come to the situation where they're trying to take away the green spaces, which are for people to enjoy.
Dennis, let me stop you again there, because Dennis, this is a performance monitoring report. Refer to something on the report. I would also be aware that every councillor, we have 93 quite rightly strongly represents your area. Yet you and I sat down for an hour and a half, and I think there's about 4 cabinet members who are coming for a walk round your ward, given the fact that it has been identified as left behind or something like that. So I promise you, Dennis, we're doing all we can for you, but you are making it hard, mate. So I think I need to end this, then we need to move on to the next part of our agenda. But thank you for coming along. And please leave your seat at that point, Dennis, because thank you. We're back on performance monitoring. Does anybody have any further point to make on this corporate performance visual? We've had some useful comments and I'm grateful for those. Mike, you wanted to come in?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Leader. If I could come in, I just wanted to draw people's attention to the future, I think it's on one of the later pages, it's the future items for consideration. And I'm kind of surprised it wasn't mentioned about things like one-stop shop figures, calls for the contact center. And it's been very difficult to actually assess that, because if we put a penny stats and compared number of calls to the previous period, it would obviously be way higher than any of the predecessor councils. So it's going to be more, you'll see more of those stats coming out as we're able to compare our own stats next quarter and the quarters after. The one stat that I did think I would pull out and draw people's attention to is the footfall through the one-stop shops and our reception areas. For the first quarter that we've had, we're triple the footfall for the entire year of 2020, which is unsurprising given COVID, but it's interesting that each month now we're building that footfall up. So it's good to see that people that need that one, that face-to-face contact are getting it again. And in future reports, you'll see be able to see more comparisons with the customer service data that we're generating. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any further comments at all? Oh, sorry, Adam, you were going to come in. Beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can draw members' attention to slight tweaks to the format of this paper that I'll be requesting we make in future, is that in addition to the number of new council homes built, we include the right to buy purchases to date, so that we can demonstrate a net position. And furthermore, of course, the pledge within the manifesto and the undertaking within the corporate plan is to increase affordable housing and council homes. At this point in time, council homes only apply to the Old Northampton Borough. In my ward of Bugbrook, of course, we rely on housing associations, particularly Grand Union Housing, and we rely particularly upon affordable housing. And I think by having that KPI written into this report, we'll be in a better position to make sure that developers are delivering on the obligations that they sign up to during the planning process.
Jolly good. Thanks, Adam. On that note, I see we have no further comments. Direct your attention, if I may, back to the recommendations. Just ask you to confirm, please, your agreements to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, quickly on to our next report. This is item 9, and this is the transformation. And transformation is one word, but a couple of other words that have cropped up that also describe this. This is the productivity. This is the productivity report, as Malcolm likes to say, or to use Danielle's phrase, this is the investor save report. We know that these 2 new councils in Northamptonshire, going unitary alone, the savings from that are not enough. We have to transform services. We have to make them better, and we have to make them more cost effective. This report lays out some of the things that have been done. It talks a little bit about how transformation has become a part of the culture of the council, but I have to say that we are throwing transformation absolutely into focus and having a serious number of meetings and assessing a number of further schemes, looking to ensure that we are saving as much as we can without cutting services and doing it as early as possible. So perhaps the key thing about this is absolutely on our agenda. The budget setting process that starts soon will be asking all directors and all departments to come forward with savings, financial savings that do not reduce the quality of service, if anything, enhance the quality of service. So the key points about this is that we're onto it. There is a that team works schemes which are then assessed to ensure that we're doing everything we possibly can. So there's now a pipeline of transformation projects building, and already some key pieces of work underway to ensure that we're going to reduce the costs of operating the council whilst delivering a better service. I think we have a couple of speakers on this item, actually. Item 9. Actually, we just have one, which is Councillor Emma Roberts. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Not wanting to put down all of the hard work that is clearly ongoing, I was disappointed at the kind of progress that this report suggests. And maybe it's the report that does the process injustice, Chair, rather than the fact that things aren't happening at the speed we need to see them. Right at the back of the report, I can't possibly see how a transformation plan can have no climate impact identified, even if this report is just for noting, nor could it have no community impact identified, even if it is just this report for noting. I was really concerned about that item and the consideration of that. There's also no equality and diversity assessment as part of it, no equality impact assessment as part of it, and it's a transformation programme. I can't again understand why, even if this report is just for noting, that there's no consideration whatsoever being given to any of that. And actually, that theme does run across a lot of the reports. There's no equality and diversity item on those agendas. And there is very little or no climate impact considered or community impact considered in any of the reports. Now, it may well be that officers are considering that in detail, but it's not being documented appropriately on that back page. So I think we need to see some change there for consideration. Then a couple of points on the actual detail in the report. There's a mention of a new electronic project management software system. And I just wondered if we had any detail at what cost that was being implemented as part of this transformation project and what benefits it's actually going to achieve. It sounded very technical and quite fangled. I just wondered what we were going to get out of it. There's a future ways of working paragraph, and I'm hearing this a lot now from local authorities: future ways of working, modern ways of working, agile working. You know, they're all using different titles. But in that item at 6.4.5, there's a restructure and redeployment programme detailed. And earlier on, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Longley talked about productivity savings and not cuts, but restructure and redeployment, I feel cuts when I read things like that. There's no detail of what those redundancy levels are proposed, and I wondered if we had any detail around what redundancy levels were proposed as part of the suggested consultation. At 6.47, there's talk of ICANN, and we've debated ICANN in lots of detail. I'm not going to go into that, and Councillor Golby and the director have provided me with lots of information that I've needed around that subject matter. But it does detail winter 2021 as being the pressure point, and winter 2021 is right upon us. Have we given any consideration in either the transformation plan or in other plans on what that cut-off point is of where that actual impact can be monitored by the work that the ICANN programme is delivering? Because I know in the budget we've spent a considerable amount of money on Newton Europe, but we're not yet seeing those savings come through into either the transformation plan or the adults situation. And I think that's probably my lot. Thank you, Chair.
A couple of things on that I can answer. I would hope that all of the things you mentioned have been considered, but have been considered not to impact through this particular report. But I would add to your comments about the importance of ensuring these things are assessed. Sarah's nodding. I think we can say that, Sarah, can't we? Yeah. Please, if you want to make any further comment.
Just to just say as well, I totally agree with your points about the format of the report. This will be the last format that's more like a verbal report. So we will have much more in terms of all the pipeline of projects. So just to give you the assurance that every directorate has a very large pipeline of transformation projects because of just the ability to change, whether that's disaggregating from the north, whether it's aggregating the districts and boroughs together, whether it's using technology, whether it's around procurement, or whether it's about maybe looking at greener ways of working. So the next report you'll get for the next quarter will have much more detail in terms of all the projects outlined. Just want to give the consideration as well that we are looking at equality, we're looking at the green agenda, we're looking at efficiency by how we work, but very much a focus on productivity as well. And in terms of some of the work around restructures, that's still being worked through. So I know one of them is just looking at just using our staff in a different way, making them more productive and looking at more apprenticeship roles, and looking at care leavers as well. But again, those are sort of early days in terms of that report. I know also from the point of view around what we're doing with adult services that we're making a lot of work with ICANN anyway, and look at some of the investor saves. So I know if Stuart was here as well, he would be talking about some of the intervention projects that have been put in place. And again, probably what you'll be wanting for next time is far more detail. So you would get more of an oversight of what we're doing against different themes like technology, what we're doing about process change, but also what we're doing about each directorate. So that will be coming. That's where the system comes in, which is I don't know what the exact cost of the system is, but it was a low level cost to do that, but it allows us to do project management and to have sort of high quality reporting. So you get far more information.
Just to add on to what Sarah said there about the actual software system, it's effectively like a Visio or an MS project, sort of products that you might have used in the past. What's great about it is it sits in the cloud, which is where I want us to have a cloud first strategy. And actually, I think what we need to do on the technology that underpins all of this is almost do a separate report that goes into that in a bit more detail. So rather than picking out the cost of one software license product, because actually per user that's going to be very low compared to perhaps other things that we do in terms of back-end infrastructure and cloud. I think we need to spin that off as a separate report moving forwards.
Brilliant, thank you, both helpful. Emma, quick comment on that?
Yeah, very, very quickly. I really appreciate the commentary, Sarah and Mike, and I agree with you on that. It'd be good to understand exactly what it's going to do for us. I think from the restructure and the redundancy perspective, we need to understand as members what these transformation programs are going to do to our workforce. We have to. And just finally on the item around, the content of the report, I think even when the report itself hasn't going to have a huge impact, there needs to be more. People need to see more than no climate impact identified. They need to see the consideration and detail and why you've ruled that out. And that's not just in that service, that's across all of these papers, both for here and for full council. Thank you, Chair, for indulgence.
I'd agree with that. Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Any further comments at all? Lizzie, you going to make a comment?
Just very briefly, because we're obviously running out of time here. It was just to say that the project management system, I'm assured that it is a top-notch project management system. And I know that businesses use it, and it's about working smarter, not harder, and it's about efficiencies in terms of responses, which is going to benefit our residents ultimately. So I feel very assured that they've chosen a really good project management system here.
Thank you, Lizzie. Catherine, you're going to make a comment, I think.
Yeah, it was just on the report, just to reassure Councillor Roberts that we are currently doing a tour of all the management teams. And actually, the first one took place last week, and I raised exactly that point there and said that we need to make sure that when we're completing the reports, we are actually dealing with those things that we've said that we were going to address. So it's something that I will be picking up as monitoring officer as reports are coming forward as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Matt.
Yeah, just very quickly on ICANN. People Scrutiny had a really good session on ICANN last cycle round, and I know as a part of the recommendation or the agreement was that Stuart, the director, and his team will come back and give an update on exactly how the mitigations and the plans that are being put in place now have an impact as well. So I'm satisfied that that's being covered off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, this is just noting, so just ask you to confirm your agreement, please, to the report being noted. Thank you very much. Okay, takes us on to item 10. This one is with Mike. This is Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Report. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this report is to inform the Cabinet of the findings of the Local Government and Care Ombudsman's annual review into inquiries and complaints received about Northamptonshire County Council. You will see from the report it details various stats and contacts received by sovereign authority. And the recommendation is that we note the contents and recommendations from the Ombudsman's report.
Anybody any comments at all? Questions? Okay, we have a speaker. We welcome Councillor Bob Purser. Welcome, Bob. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that whilst this report clearly fulfills our statutory requirements, what it doesn't tell is what we've learned as a council from the complaints that have gone to the Ombudsman. And I would hope that in future we might be able to hear back what we've learned, what we've done, how it relates to other complaints that the council receives.
Seems a good point. Mike, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm really keen to get in the process around complaints because I was always taught that a complaint is a gift, and if you deal with it properly, actually the person is more happier than had they not had a problem and dealt with you at all. So it's certainly something that's in that part of that transformation work that we just talked about.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent point, Bob. And Matt, do you want to make a comment on
Yeah,
that?
just on that point, I'm assured also that there is a huge amount of learning taken from any complaint, and I've had a note today from one of the assistant directors to say that they try and embed the learning and best practice of any complaint that has gone through the system. So I'm sure there is more detail that we can give and share with members, but that does happen, the learning and embedding that things shouldn't happen again. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? No? Okay, in which case, just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations, please. Is it agreed? Thank you. This now takes us on to item 11, which is Rebecca, which is the strategic plan consultation item. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This item, I think, is going to develop considerable public interest as we go along, and I think that's reflected development of the new West Northants strategic plan. The item before you has 3 elements, which I will go through in a bit more depth than perhaps than other items, because I think it is so important. So the first item is our spatial options consultation paper, and this as Appendix A. So this paper comprises 4 key parts. The first is a proposed spatial vision, which outlines our ambition for West Northamptonshire's economy, people and environment in 2050, together with place-based visions for Northampton, Daventry, Brackley, Towcester, and our rural areas. Secondly, there are 16 strategic objectives to deliver the vision, which are linked to the priorities set out in the corporate plan. Thirdly, there's an explanation of the scale of housing and employment growth required up to 2050, as evidenced by the Housing and Economics Needs Assessment. And fourthly, a number of potential spatial options to meet the housing and economic needs. And these, I think, are going to garner the most public interest. The proposed vision, objectives, and spatial options have all been informed by comments received during the issues consultation held between August and October 2019. It's important to emphasize that all of the options are being presented as potential options, and at this stage, the consultation is a genuine opportunity for the community to shape the preferred strategy. Absolutely no decisions have been made or preferred options decided, and further technical work is required on this area. None of these sites are allocated. So on the spatial options consultation paper, I've picked out some key points. And the vision has been informed by responses received to the issues consultation and by engagement with members through workshops, and that's members of the predecessor authorities, and the workshops were held towards the end of last year and early this year, and reflects the vision in the corporate plan. 16 strategic objectives are proposed, which support the delivery of the vision and cover climate change, green infrastructure and natural capital, landscape, heritage, education and skills, health and well-being, infrastructure, connections, protecting and building communities, both urban and rural, supporting town centres, housing and the economy. The Housing and Economic Needs Assessment identifies an unmet need of 48 hectares of employment land. This figure factors in existing employment land supply, so it is the amount of new land that the West Northants structural plan would need to plan for. In terms of housing, the local housing need for the area is 2,139 dwellings per annum, which equates to 64,170 dwellings between 2020 and 2050. The existing supply identified in our current strategic plan equates to around 33,000 dwellings, which leaves a residual requirement of 30,300 dwellings that the new structural plan will need to provide. Based on an initial assessment of sites which are included in the strategic land availability assessment, the following potential spatial options are identified, and I'll just whiz through these quickly. Spatial option 1 identifies growth at Northampton as the principal urban area. Spatial option 2 identifies growth at Daventry, and this is employment and housing land, I'd just point out. Option 3, employment options at M1 Junction 18. Option 4 is growth at the market towns of Brackley and Towcester. Option 5 is new proposed settlements. And option 6 are the rural areas. So I'll move on now to the second element of the report, which is the Appendix B, the local development scheme. This is a statutory requirement to have a local development scheme that sets out key planning policy documents to prepare for development in our authority. Its aim is to inform key stakeholders, that being residents, developers, service and infrastructure providers and others, how and when they will be able to participate as the policy documents come forward following preparation. The SCI covers the local development schemes previously prepared by the predecessor authorities for their local planning, including neighbourhood plans, and then sets out the programme for the Northampton Local Plan Part 2 and the West Northamptonshire Strategic Plan. The third part of the report is Appendix C, which is the Statement of Community Involvement. All local authorities are required to have in place an up-to-date Statement of Community Involvement. Each of the predecessor councils produced SCIs, however, they deal with their Part 2 plans. They do not provide a single coordinated approach to inform plan making across West Northants and are therefore not fit for purpose for the forthcoming strategic plan. Therefore, a draft SCI for the development of our strategic plan has been produced, consulted upon, and then agreed by the 3 predecessor authorities. Appendix C documents the consultation responses at the end of 2020 and suggests some minor changes to the SCI as a result. So moving on to consultation, which is the point of this paper this evening. Consultation will take place over an 8-week period starting as early as possible in October, with a mix of in-person online events and briefings for members. The consultation paper includes a number of specific consultation questions, and there will be a dedicated consultation website which will provide which people can use to submit responses to the questions online. There will be a further call for sites as part of the consultation to ensure that we have not missed any reasonable site options. The consultation will be supported by a number of background documents, including the Housing and Economic Needs Assessment, Strategic Land Availability Assessment, Housing and Employment Background Papers, a Sustainability Appraisal Report. Details of the responses submitted to the issues consultation, including the call for sites, will also be available online. Be reported back to Cabinet and will form the development of a preferred strategy, which will be set out in the next consultation. This will comprise a full draft plan to include proposed policies as well as strategic site allocations. The LDS anticipates that this will take place in June 2022, with eventual adoption of the plan by March 2024. If approved, the local development scheme and statement of community involvement will be published on the website on the 23rd of September, following the expiry of the Cabinet call-in period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's move. We have 5 speakers. Let's move to our speakers. I'll read out who they are first so that you know you're on the list. Councillors McCord, Barter, Pritchard, Duffy and Stone. So Ian, over to you. Welcome. Well, have we, the Deanshanger trio, got a firing order, have you? Gone. Go your, do it your way. Let's see the whole performance. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you once again for allowing me to speak. And it's the speaks that I'm actually going to is with regards to the process, and obviously on behalf of our residents and also the present, the past, and obviously the future. I specifically going to address agenda item 11.5B, which obviously is my ward area. To say that I was surprised to receive the Cabinet papers detailing the spatial options, to say is an understatement. I'm very concerned after reading this particular document that there is consideration being given of potential development of 6,000 houses around Old Stratford and Deanshanger in my ward. And this will be actually over double the size of Deanshanger. I do appreciate that this document to detail how we should consult on residents' growth and how it should be achieved. But I do not accept that there will be, I do accept that there will be large growth in and around the south of our county, and particularly Old Stratford, Deanshanger, Cosgrove and Pottersbury. What I can't accept is that the areas outlined in spatial option 5B, in my case, have come about without any involvement of the ward members to discuss and using their experience and local knowledge. Why are we relying on MK's 2050 plan? What about a total new development? Not a lot of consideration has been given to this. What has happened to the SNC equivalent of the Policy Planning Committee? This could have been used as a vehicle to enable input. Why should officers alone be determining the sites and the policy without the involvement of ward councillors? After all, we are supposed to be a democracy. I note that there was a call for sites in 2019 onwards. Who was responsible for determining their suitability as potential development sites? Surely as part of the process, this is when relevant councillors should be involved in seeing and response to the contributing shortlist. The author of the report, which is not aware of any of the potential areas. In fact, he probably doesn't know too much about the south of the county. Adjacent to the shaded areas, there are other options under consideration, and I know personally of something equating to 8,400 houses. I can actually go through some of the potential land agents and developers that are interested, but I don't think it's appropriate for this meeting. Surely as representatives of the community, we should be involved in this process, even at a very early stage. How can this process be undertaken even when the Cambridge Arc in this particular process has not been defined yet? I know what the response will be. This is only a request for consultation and how we will go about the particular process. And we all know what consultation means in political terms. Will the views of the responders to the consultants really take into account and be acted upon? And who will decide what is adopted? Should we delay the consultation process until we've had further time to consider the potential sites to enable some local input? As a final thought, I feel we have missed a golden opportunity to develop our future growth with the cooperation and the support of councillors and residents.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
I don't think I expect a response, but at this
Well-
particular time, but I thought it was appropriate to know what councillors are feeling, and I've spoken to a fair amount of my colleagues, and they are of similar mind. Not just my ward, but when you look at the other wards, considering they are significant amount of potential developments.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, do you want to make a comment
I
to that
could- if I
point?
could
Or
respond to just
Yeah,
a couple
okay.
of points that Councillor Pritchard has made. And I know, I think I can accept that when this sort of thing is published, it does create alarm. But in terms of the filtering process, all the sites here have been through the SLA, which is published on the website, and I can forward to you if you've had difficulty finding it. The website that shows all the information, the background information that has gone into the production of these sites for consultation. So it has been a very, very detailed process involving officers and members. And there've been, as I referenced, a lot of workshops that took place with the predecessor authorities involving all the authorities and various members in place at that time, some of whom are no longer councillors. So that's the history of the filtering process. You mentioned the Cambridge Arc. These are all works in progress, and we have to get on and develop our strategic plan. And this is a very important first step. our plan expires in a fairly short space of time, and government are expecting us to come forward with a plan. And if we're going to maintain any sort of control over our planning system, we have to have a robust strategic plan in place. We have to get on with it. We can't wait for other organisations, but we are mindful of the impact that that will have.
Could I just implore that local councillors are involved, not specifically senior local councillors, I mean the previous areas. The backbenchers should be involved, and at the moment they're not being involved.
Thank you. This is a consultation process, as you've referenced, and I hope that they will come forward and make their feelings known. There are going to be many briefings specifically for members' question answer sessions where they can make their feelings known. You also reference our policy planning committee. That is with our monitoring officer now for drawing up terms of reference and will be in place very shortly.
Just a final thought is that the residents in my particular ward are very, very concerned indeed with the information that's being published at the moment. As you can appreciate, they've already had a significant amount of development, particularly around Deanshanger. But at the same token, when you look at the size of this potential, and I appreciate it's not been even thought about being firmed up at the moment, but even the inclination that that's a possibility is incredibly frightening.
I do understand that, but that is not a reason for not making them aware.
Thank you very much for the time, Chairman. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your comments, Ken. Do understand the impact that this has and the concern it can bring people. So if there's any further comment to make, thank you for your responses there, Rebecca. Who is next? Is it William? Yeah, welcome, William.
Thank you. I think whenever I look at a plan for development, which areas to develop, what for, two questions come to mind, especially for residential developments. Where are these people going to work and how are they going to get there? You simply cannot separate development and transport. But reading through the document, there seems to be an assumption that car is the default method of transport between employment and residential areas. And to a large extent, that is inevitably true. And there are exceptions in the report, such as mentions of Long Buckby Station, which isn't actually very near to Long Buckby, let alone Daventry, and mention of bus services. And this doesn't sit well with net zero. We must be aiming for modal shift. So all I'd say is we need to consider more positively public and active transport to serve these developments, whether residential or employment, thinking where is transport needed to support the developments and where does development enable improved transport, which has wider benefit beyond the development area. So it's consultation, I appreciate. I would say, can we do anything to encourage input from those issues from responders to the consultation? And can we consider transport in the analysis of the responses?
Okay, thank you, William. Did you want to comment at all, Rebecca, or maybe even Phil in due course?
Well, I'd have to say I agree. Modal shift is going to be very important, and that's going to be part of the debate, because as we've heard from our public speaker, and I will reference your questions in a moment, he was querying the development around Northampton and into the villages, and there is the issue of, if you develop in the villages, how do you get transport and net zero when most employment sites are in the urban areas? So it's a real contrast and conflict, and something that we will be considering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Please,
I was just going to say, William's quite right. I mean, it's all links to transport, and it all links to connectivity. And where people live, they've got to be connected to where they work, and that's very, very important. How we do that, I don't know. Unfortunately, cars are still in existence, and although they're perhaps changing to electric and things like that over the coming next 30 years or so, I still think there's going to be a demand for people to be able to travel in a similar way to they do at the moment. And obviously, it's not just that; it's the infrastructure that goes with that that is necessary. And you know, we've discussed for many years, you and I, Mr. Chairman, the question of the A45 through Northampton. And again, that's going to obviously come up with this project as well as it goes forward. So I think, yeah, William's quite right. Transport, roads, infrastructure is all very, very important and it's got to be taken into account.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, William. Hope that's of some reassurance. Ian, yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. My colleagues are worried I might lower the tone.
That's what they put you on last, is it?
Absolutely. I think, though, this is a pretty poor piece of work. And if implemented, will change the character of the district forever. The Northampton-centric nature of this administration shines through. Many times there are references to the Northampton sites with a phrase that states something along the lines of, with all sites in Northampton, care needs to be taken, etc., etc. But there's no such care seen or taken or demonstrated outside of the 30-mile-an-hour limit. The inclusion of some of the sites to me are obvious and it's not contentious. For example, the M1 site at Junction 15, which is currently the compound for the Smart Motorway project, is in effect brownfield. And I don't have an issue with that. However, my reading of the report states that you need to have less than 50 hectares of employment land. Yet this seeks to allocate many times that, and I don't know why. Turning to housing, the report states that over and above the existing plans, WNC needs to find 33,800 homes in the next 30 years, bringing the total to about 64,000. It states that up to half of those can be in the countryside as windfall natural growth. There's an argument to be made about growing every settlement everywhere by a small amount, as the gap between the smaller ones and the larger ones grows ever wider. However, the proposed spread of the new development is unfair. There is no urban capacity study attached, or from my reading, even proposed. Just a mere 6,000 or 10% are going into Northampton urban area. The proposals for my own ward, just down the road, are staggering. 1 in 3 of the homes required in my ward, 10,500 minimum, and this will be nearer 12 or 15,000 when some of the other proposals are well known and are thrown into the mix. And I am rather surprised that they're not even in the options. There's another ward. There is no other ward in WNC that has a massive allocation in the north and a massive allocation in the south, other than the Deanshanger one, which makes me wonder, is this personal? Clearly, the administration continues to think they can write me off politically and therefore write us ward off politically and have no consequences to the Conservatives. Such thinking would be mendacious. I note recently that the Toaster Racecourse was served with a noise abatement notice by this council. Is it part of the plan then to render the site commercially unviable and then say its redevelopment is welcome news rather than have it derelict? Does that explain why the administration thinks it's sensible to destroy Grade 2 parkland? And I really don't know how that made it through the sifting process. The proposed southern extension to the Toaster Southern Extension may make Toaster approximate to Northampton, but we shouldn't be about turning the market towns into Northampton Mark II. Big towns good, small towns bad, countryside bad too. There is nothing on the infrastructure challenges such development would bring. The A5 and A508 are currently capacity now. There needs to be a strategic study on these roads and the principle of I before E, i.e. infrastructure before development. This typifies the thinking, all tactics, little strategy. The new settlements are left out or maybe brought back later or something else. But how can any options paper be seriously considered when there's a big strategic option of new settlements are omitted? Turning to the development scheme itself, this is flawed. There is little or no mention of the Oxford-Cambridge Arc spatial strategy. It gets fleeting mention, but its importance is not stressed. This will be a national planning document like the NPPF. The WNC local plan part 1 will never be adjudged sound if it does not accord with that spatial strategy. As we do not know what it will contain, that judgment cannot be made now. The current timetable for the spatial strategy, the ARC spatial strategy, is autumn 2022. That's when they hope to consult on it. Yet WNC plan to consult on their draft part 1 in June
22. The local development scheme needs to have a step in its timetable to check the locally emerging strategy against the national emerging policy to ensure conformity. Otherwise, the local plan will crash and burn at examination stage. This really is very poor and second piece rate of work and needs a lot of urgent review. And I urge you to withdraw it from the agenda and bring forward a more sensible plan that stands some chance of allowing development without the devastating effects the proposal would have on my ward and the whole of the district, and may eventually pass the soundness test, which is the more important of the lot. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Ian. Director, do you want to comment at this stage on any of those points? Or?
No, just comments well made and noted, but please let me assure you that there's nothing personal in this, Councillor McCord.
I believe you, Rebecca.
I mean, that's a really interesting comment, Ian. Rebecca's driven this piece of work forward. None of the rest of us have been involved. This is not personal about you. This is not personal about Northampton. Rebecca, who's done this? Have we sat in dark rooms having plot against the Ian meetings or anything like that?
I think I understand Councillor McCord's comments, and it's absolutely fine with me. That's fine. I know it's been driven by Colin Staves, who does have very detailed knowledge of our district. He was involved in he led the development of our core strategy, which is still excellent. He is leading this project, and he is a very sound officer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, two further speakers, which is first of all Councillor Janice Duffy, followed by Councillor Daniel Stone. Janice, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I've just heard from the previous councillor that he says that Northampton is getting more care in placing housing, but I find to the contrary with Fraser Road and N3. I've read the report of Councillor Breeze, which I found very interesting. But you say at 5:12 about the reports being unfit for purpose, and I believe the plan was put together at the end of the Northampton Borough Council, was put together with undue speed, and really the findings need to be scrapped and reviewed. The environment, the health impact assessment should be reviewed as vital, and also the residents survey. I understand that there's 43 people going to be asked who live local to the green side, and I mean, who are these people, and why were they chosen? The area has it's enduring another round of house building, and the density already is bad. People go to this site for chilling out. Children have been grown up and they enjoy the natural ambience and the wildlife and the trees. WNC is promoting tree planting and emphasising the environment, as we all should, of course, because it is an emergency. But here we are in a densely housed area in one of the most poorest and deprived communities found by both Friends of the Earth, lacking in natural spaces.
Janice, I'm sorry, I'm going to slightly interrupt you because we're drifting into the same territory where the monitoring officer had to give us a warning about this discussion with Dennis Meredith. You're discussing something, first of all, which will be going to a planning application, which we shouldn't discuss in this forum. We shouldn't have any influence over the outcome of planning decisions. And we're talking about something that's not on the agenda. If we are to talk about something that's on the agenda, we have to tell people we're going to talk about it. You're welcome to come along and listen to what's been said. Nobody has been told there'll be any discussion on the NPH development at Fraser Road this evening. So I think I'm probably right again, Catherine, in saying we ought to
wasn't
not
meaning
pursue this discussion. Is that fair to
to
say?
stray into that. I just find that
Rebecca, you want to make a point?
Just to help councillor, I think she's actually referring to the local development scheme, and there is a reference to that, to weight of planning documents. You reference 5.12. 5.12,
Yeah,
which I
not
think
fit
it is
for
the planning document.
purpose.
And I think your point is that is a planning document which you're debating, but that is coming forward for examination in the autumn in front of the inspector. And I think I've already said to you and to Councillor Meredith and others that the way to deal with that is to write to the inspectors.
Yeah, which I have done.
And ask them if they will consider it as part of the examination. That is the way you're going to be dealing with that. It's not allocated in this item. It's not relevant to this item.
Well,
and it's listed, and the item that you're referring to in the local scheme is an excellent policy and won't be and can't be undone in this manner. It is a relevant planning document as part of the local scheme for Northampton. It can't be undone and reversed in the manner which you're speaking. You're now going to rely on going to examination and having that site looked at.
So I can't comment on that.
No, because it's not part
only
of this.
43 people going to undertake.
I'm not sure
the-
where that figure comes from, but you're also referring to
That's from the council.
something that's not in consideration of this agenda item. You're talking about an item that's for Northampton local plan, which is a completely separate document and not part of this debate this evening. These are just large strategic sites, over about 700 dwellings, I think the figure is. Fraser Road is a much small site as part of the Northampton town local plan.
Then can I just stress that any housing, urban housing areas should have their environmental issues reconsidered and the spatial.
In terms of
Yeah.
strategic sites, that's a relevant observation to make, yes. In
Is
terms
it?
of the large strategic sites, you can make that observation.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Janice. Last speaker on this item is Councillor Danielle Stone, after which we'll take a break. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're all getting a bit weary, aren't we? Well, I am anyway. This is potentially going to be a really, really important document, isn't it? And so we need to get the process right, and we need to get the vision right, and we need to get the vocabulary right, it seems to me. And it's quite interesting because it seems to me that two huge drivers for this is the growth agenda and the climate emergency, and they kind of work against each other, don't they? So I totally agree with the councillor or the speaker who came up and was talking about the need to have transport and links as a central feature of this document. And it seems to me that we have got to be exceedingly brave. This is a future looking document. We've got to be future looking, and we've got to start having some radical ambition for how we're going to change to meet the climate emergency, which leads me to my first point. Where we're talking about, in this document, we're talking about climate change. That is not good enough. That is not good enough. That is not going to help our citizens understand the radical nature of the changes that we need to implement to become carbon neutral. We have got to talk about the climate emergency, because surely we do understand that is what we are dealing with. So we don't need resilience for climate change. We need resilience for the climate emergency. And I think we need to be very, very bold and upfront about that. I also think, this is the time to be a little bit visionary and to think about what is it, where is it we want to be? How do we want our world to look like? In terms, I'll give you an example. I'll give you examples of that as I go through. In terms of new settlements, can I just make a plea really that we include into our thinking a travellers transit site? I am sick to death of the level of racist abuse that we find levelled at travellers. I understand that them coming in and occupying Oldie's car park or Far Cotton Rec is a nuisance for everybody, but it's a nuisance that we've created because we're not meeting their needs, and it's a cost to us. And it's a cost that we can avoid if we meet the needs of the travellers and what their need is for a transit site. If I go through this I've talked about on page 105, objective 1, it should say, in my view, before we go out to consultation, the climate emergency. I just wanted to make a point under objective 5, 106. We cannot talk about raising achievement of children unless we pay really serious attention and put a lot of investment into the early years. You cannot build houses on foundations of sand. You've got to have solid foundations, and they start with the early years. So I think that needs to be put into the document. On objective 11, housing, we're talking about housing, designing out crime. That's great. We need to be thinking much more positively about housing and how we design in community, how we design in social capital, how we design in community resilience. And I think all of those things are really, really important. And if you want an example of how that can happen, go to Spring Burrows. I'll walk you around Spring Burrows, where NPH has transformed the outside area of Spring Burrows from a very unsafe, unfriendly, grey, cold, hostile environment to an environment that's really well used by the residents and by children now. And that is through design. And I think it's really important that we just don't, design out crime, but we design in what it is that we need to see. Building social capital for me is really important. So if you go around Spring Burrows, very working class, very deprived area, what you see in the outside spaces are people taking pride in their community garden. They're doing it together. For me, that's building social capital. This is a network of people who look after each other, who look after their environment. At the other end of the estate, you see women who let their children out to play, supervise. They're supervising them. They've learned those skills of being informal play leaders, supervising each other's children in the neighbourhood. Absolutely brilliant examples, enabled by the design work that NPH has done.
I think we need
for
to
us.
move on now. Do you have any last points to squeeze in, Danielle?
Can I just say that under 3.9, I really think throughout this document, actually, not just at 3.9, but we need to have something on social value. We cannot produce a document for a forward-looking age without talking about the Social Value Act and what social value is going to mean to us. So I would ask that under 3.9, we add social value, community resilience, and the building of social capital. Can I just also throw in one more thing? Under employment, please can we have a look at the social capital, the gifts that our population brings to us. In my division in Castle, I think people there must speak at least 120 languages. If that is not a marketable talent and skill, you tell me what it is. In terms of inward investment and outward sales, we need to build the capital that we've got on our language base.
Okay, I think these things are important, Danielle. These are classic things to put into the consultation. We're about to take the vote on whether that consultation proceeds. And thank you very much. Yes, but we heard from you earlier, didn't we? Have you got something new to add? We have thick end of a dozen papers still to go. It's 8 o'clock at night. We're taking really important decisions when people had a long day at work too. Is there a really additional comment that you wanted to make there, may I ask?
I just wanted to ask that my previous
Yeah.
comments were considered and that therefore
Ah.
it might be that it would be best to delay a vote on this.
Brilliant. Let's come back to Rebecca to sum up, because I know that she has captured and got some comments to make. Yes, let's do that now.
I did
Rebecca.
earlier reference, and I was going to come back to you on some of your comments. You mentioned further options. There is a further call for sites they're all welcome. They all come in and they will all be considered. You then mentioned specifically Grange Park, which is a site I'm aware of, which was refused to appeal, which is a site for 300 houses. And I'm not particularly au fait with the details of the refusal, but I think it was a technical details, which maybe they can be overcome. I know they're about connectivity and the road network. It's a larger site for 3,000 houses, which goes up the eastern side, I think, of Grange Park. And you're right about Fox Hill. I've been having a look at the maps during the debate, and I'll ensure that Fox Hill is removed, because yes, it is rather misleading. And Fox Hill is not identified as development as far as I'm aware. I think those were the main points that you'd raised.
But also,
Northampton is our largest urban area. That is going to be, a matter of fact, that it is going to be a centre for development. It is a large employment area as well. We need connectivity. There are jobs in Northampton on the edge of the trading estates on the edge of Northampton. It will be have immense pressure for development. And so it's just the way it is, but it is consultation and responses will be considered.
okay, thank you. Any further comments at all? Stuart, did you want to comment there? We think if
Just very quickly to pick up on some of those, and again, in terms of the spatial options, there's obviously options 2, 3 and 4 that looks at the wider West North Hants as well as Northampton. But I'd just like to give members assurance that through the consultation process, that we will be picking up and making sure that all ward members and all members of West North Hants are included in that consultation. Equally, we'll be looking at towns and parishes as well to make sure that there's a facility that we can communicate and engage those important organisations. And as Rebecca said, and again, it's worth repeating, in terms of the overall decision making, the planning committee will be used, the spatial planning committee, as a tool in terms of making sure that members' views and the consultation views are absolutely part of the process as we go forward. So just to give those assurances and follow on from Rebecca there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Any further questions or comments? I think we've covered all of our speakers, haven't we? Yeah, okay. Let's direct your attention back, if we may, to the recommendations of this report. And I should please to confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Let's take a break for 10 minutes. It's 20 past now, so we start at 8:30 again, if we may. Thank you very much. Phil, this is with you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, this paper provides an update on the Farthinghoe bypass, which remains our priority, or one of our top priorities for highways in West Northamptonshire. The report includes a summary of the results from a consultation exercise which asked residents for their opinion and preference regarding possible bypass routes. The consultation, which was concluded in January 2021, received 430 responses. The results indicated clear support for a bypass and for a northern route over a southern route. The consultation report has been shared with the Parish Council, who Mr. Timmis and I have met, and local ward members, and is available on requests. Can I just say, Chairman, in earlier versions of the report, there was a typing error in paragraph 8.1 of the report. I think if you're looking online, you'll find it's correct because it has been updated. On the first line, it says, while the consultation demonstrated clear support for northern route, in some papers it might say V3, but V1 is the correct reference in that paragraph. The Cabinet paper then outlines the next steps to progress the scheme development work, which includes consideration of the issues raised during the consultation, which will lead to the recommendation of a preferred route coming back to this body. This will then enable more detailed work focusing on the single preferred route. Can I say, Mr. Chairman, we need to learn our lessons, and we're undertaking this project in a very thorough and precise way. We got our fingers a bit burnt, not perhaps so much us, with the Northwest Relief Road, and we want to make sure that we go forward here in a robust way, in a safe way, and in a sensible way, coming up with something that is absolutely right. We don't want any more situations where things get rushed through and perhaps aren't necessarily as accurate as they should be. So we are taking this seriously, we're doing it thoroughly, and we're doing it in accordance with all the recommended ways of working. So once the preferred route is designated, the business case will then be developed and engineering design work will commence. It should be noted that to bring a new road scheme through the development stages to opening takes several years and significant investment. And the Cabinet paper notes estimated timescales of the earliest the road would open as being 2028, with an initial investment of several £100,000 to develop the design in advance of construction. Taking into account these long timescales, I have also asked officers to consider an interim solution to help address the current issues within the village. I think those who've seen the photographs will fully recognise the problem we have in Farthinghoe, with lorries becoming stuck together, caravans being caught between the walls and vehicles. It's a very dangerous area for pedestrians, with a very, very narrow footpath with lorries passing within centimetres of you. So it does really need something to tide us over until the bypass is built. Taking into account as I say, these long time scales, the interim solution to help address current issues and HGVs might also help in the business case for the bypass. Because if the road has traffic lights, for example, so you have one-way traffic, then that will add to the economic case for the bypass and to speed traffic up. So, yeah, you know, that might help. So it is proposed that an initial interim solution is developed for further consultation, which will take place with the parish council and Farthinghoe residents. So as I say, Mr. Chairman, it is an update report. That's where we're at. That's where we're going, but we're going forward in a structured, safe, balanced way.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Thank you very much indeed. We've two speakers registered, but one was Councillor Accord, who I think has left. So we'll go to our second speaker, which is Councillor Sue Sharps. Welcome, Sue. Just while Sue's making herself comfortable, do you want to make a quick comment now, Adam?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think whilst there will understandably be a little frustration at the timescales involved in getting a project of this scale through to delivery, the fact that the cabinet member and WNC as an organisation are throwing their full weight behind this just goes to show how imprecise the earlier point was regarding the alleged disregard for areas of West Northamptonshire outside of Northampton, areas such as Brackley, which I'll be visiting for the third and fourth time, and next week, areas such as the Middleton Cheney ward, Deanshanger, right up to the north in Brixworth and up to nearly Market Harbour, obviously have our full support, and where there's infrastructure required, we'll invest in it. Where there are communities in need of support, then they'll get it. And I think that's a point that this cabinet needs to make over and over again, because we're here to represent and provide for all of West Northamptonshire, and we will do so.
Thank you, Adam. That's a helpful comment.
We need that investment, and hopefully it will be forthcoming. And it's not as if all avenues are not being pursued. We recently had the HS2 minister visit the south of the county, and I know the local MP made every effort to take him through Farthinghoe in order to boost the case and get ministerial support, or hope to get ministerial support for the bypass. So every opportunity I think you'll find people are taking in order to secure that investment.
Thank you, Phil. Sue, sorry to keep you waiting. Over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm so pleased to see this in the form that we have it here today. The importance of the bypass is immeasurable, and it cannot be underestimated for not only Farthinghoe, but the villages that it surrounds and Brackley. I'm also very pleased to see that you have put in place, just as you mentioned, interim measures, not that we can see them yet, but still they're going to come. And also that you admit quite freely that as the bid extends, that we may see the rise in costs. You've laid it out for everyone to see that this is not going to be an easy journey, but it is one that we need to address. So I'm here to say thank you. I'm here to say that I'm not going to go away. I am going to be watching this. I want to work with you, not against you. But for me and the residents of Brackley, this is a really important piece of work. It also strikes again for those residents of other places that are having new areas of building. This is a road that was previously built and outgrew its use. So again, if we can look into that in other areas, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. We appreciate your comments. Phil, did you want to make any comment?
Can I just thank the councillor for her comments? Most welcome, and I'm sure we'll work together on this. As I said right at the beginning, it is a top priority for us as far as the highways are concerned. We've got 3 priorities, and this is one of them. So yes, we want to move it ahead. We want to get going, but we're not going to be dishonest. We're going to be honest and say it as it is. And I think that's recognised in the report. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you once again. Any further comments? Rebecca, were you going to comment? Sorry, Fiona's going to comment. Over to you, Fiona.
You've been very open and honest about how long it's going to take for the bypass to be in place, which is good, because at least we've got a date to aim for, which is something we didn't have in the past, which is great. Do you have any idea about the mitigation but how long that will take and when we can expect, because why nobody's ever thought of that before, I've no idea. Some traffic lights to make it one way through the middle would be amazing. It will have consequences, obviously, of knock-on traffic, but it might discourage some of those lorries from actually going that way.
Absolutely. And officers are working on it now. And I think we're looking about a month to get that information. So we'll see what the officers come up with in about a month's time. And of course, we'll share that.
Thank you very much. Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. Fiona's actually just said what I was going to say largely, so I won't repeat it about the traffic mitigation and the knock-on effect, particularly given the impact HS2 is going to have on the A422 starting imminently. But I just want to thank Cabinet and the officers, because this has been my personal mission for a number of years. As you all know, I have worked since I'm suggesting to SNC back in December 2018 that we could direct some funds to the initial work, and I'm so grateful to NCC and the cabinet members here who put it through NCC to get it to this stage, because it really will transform how the south of the district, we're a district, aren't we? How the south connectivity works. So it's a great thing. It'll be worth waiting for and bring on the interim measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rebecca, for those comments. Stuart and I have been down and met with you, and we're happy to come down and meet at any time when anybody's got any queries. And yeah, I mean, it is a very busy road. I've seen it, but I've never seen it when the M40 is closed, and I would love to see it then, because it must be absolute chaos.
If I may, you really don't want to see it at that point. No.
I doubt I'd get there to see it, to be honest.
Great stuff. A lot of support for the work that's being done. Thank you very much indeed. At that point, we'll direct your attention to the recommendations. So actually confirm your agreement, please. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. That takes us on to item 13, which is regulatory services statutory plans, which will be David. David, over to you. Talk us through this.
Thank you, Chair. A number of the teams within regulatory services are required by law to produce specific service plans which outline how those services will be delivered in the coming year. And the report seeks Cabinet approval for these plans. I won't list them because you've got them in front of you. If we weren't pressed for time, I probably would. If approved, then the plans are pushed forward to the Food Safety Agency. Just a couple of things I just want to draw your attention on is on page 2 and 5, where we are linking through to our corporate objectives, which we'll be pleased to see. The impact of COVID on the inspection programs COVID has had an effect on our inspection programs. But we're sort of getting up to speed on that now. We are running with the Food Standards Agency Recovery Roadmap, which is detailed on page 222, should you wish to take a look at that. Just another couple of things to sort of draw your attention to. We've got an allergens legislation going live, which is all around Natasha's Law, which follows on from the tragic death of Natasha Eden Laperouse. I think that's how you pronounce her surname. That's coming forward in October. And then the item referencing spray paint enforcement is just interesting to look at the numbers or the costs of those. And people may think it's not massively costly, but councils are putting the bill of around about £1 billion a year in tidying up graffiti. So it sort of puts it into perspective. So yeah, that is my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. We've one speaker, which is Councillor Emma Roberts. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a couple of points on the report that I thought, if it's a plan that the council are going to follow, I need to make sure we understand how we've got to that place and whether we're going to be able to achieve the roadmap that's presented. So there's 340 outstanding inspections due in Northampton, but there's no detail in the report. I appreciate it wouldn't be in the plan. There's no detail in the report about how we're going to get that number of inspections outstanding down. And at 5.1.12 in the plan, that's the FSA roadmap. I just wondered, what are the chances of us actually catching up in line with that roadmap, given the numbers outstanding? I also noted there was 0 sampling of food in Northants and Daventry, and I wondered if there was a specific reason around that. Councillor Smith, I appreciate you might not be able to give me the answers this evening, but I think we've got a plan in place, but then we don't know the answers to those questions. That's something that's really important. So just a brief comment there.
So either we could come back, we can either come back to you or Stuart may well be able to answer a couple or if not all of those points.
Please, Stuart.
So I can answer 2 of the 3, Emma, and certainly more than happy to sit down, as with any of the reports, and go through in any detail. So in terms of the roadmap and fulfilling the objectives of that, obviously in terms of regulatory services, due to COVID, we've had a lot of officers doing a lot of work that it doesn't really sit within their remits, etc. And therefore, as we see businesses come back and we see officers returning to those duties, then we have built this around the resources we've got and against the numbers. Again, that's why we've given ourselves 2 years to catch up. We think that is something that we can achieve. And again, you'll see the priorities that we've made within that catching up, which hopefully will sort of filter through. We'll monitor this as with all of these programs. We'll monitor this, and again, if there is any issues, we will come back to Cabinet and explain. But at this moment, we are absolutely on track and confident that we will meet and achieve those. In terms of food sampling, sorry, like David, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go get you that information, and happy to work through David and make sure you get that information.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stuart. That's really helpful. I appreciate some may think it's a relatively mundane question to be asking, but it's a life-threatening position if it doesn't go right, isn't it? So appreciate the info.
Thank you, Emma. Further comments? Adam, you're going to comment.
Sorry, Chairman, I just need to ask a question of the monitoring officer. I have a business relationship with one of the approved food premises listed on page 220. Is that a disclosable interest? I'm effectively a customer of theirs via a commercial premises that I operate.
My wife, having the opportunity to go through it in detail, I would declare it. Sorry,
Okay. Do you want me to name the company that?
You need to be clear about the nature of the interest.
Okay, so the Smith and Clay Limited listed on page 220 is one of the suppliers to the limited company which is declared on my register of members' interests. So it's a minor relationship, but non-pecuniary. Thank you. So I thought I'd check.
Thank you, Adam. Any further comments or questions on that one? No, in which case we'll say thank you, and we'll direct your attention back to the recommendations. And I should just confirm your agreement, please. Is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, David. Takes us on to item 14, which is with Rebecca, which is conservation areas and so on. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is in 2 parts. Again, the first part relates to the Helidon Conservation Area and the proposed Spratton Conservation Area. So I'll deal with that first. So Daventry District Council commenced a programme of conservation area reviews in autumn 2016, some 15 years after the last review. At that time, the council had 24 designated conservation areas. Just by way of background, South Northants Council recently completed a programme of conservation area reviews, and NBC had a largely complete set of reviews done. This report considers the responses to the consultation exercise on the draft Helidon Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan and the proposed new conservation area in Spratton. Both drafts have been extensively consulted on, and each has had 2 sets of public meetings before and during the consultation. All processes have been published alongside officer responses. All responses have been published alongside officer responses and proposed actions in the Cabinet report. There will be several amendments to each of the appraisals, but no suggested alterations to the proposed boundaries. Helidon is an existing conservation area that last reviewed in 2000. The conservation area was reviewed in early 2020, and the draft conservation area appraisal and management plan and revised boundary were consulted upon in November last year and January this year. There is currently no designated conservation area in Stratton. However, suggestion was made for the conservation area in the Stratton Village Design Statement, so it came from the Parish Council. As a result of that, Stratton Village was surveyed and the proposed conservation area boundary and draft conservation area appraisal and management plan were prepared. These were consulted upon in March of this year and again, in March of this year to April of this year. I am recommending that, subject to editing to reflect that these documents will be in their final form, the conservation area appraisals are adopted as supplementary planning documents and the proposed boundaries be designated. So that's the first part. The second part of the report seeks permission to make and consult upon Article 4 directions for conservation areas at Wiedenbeck, Flore, Everton, Little Everton, Staverton, Kilsby, Welford and Pipsford. An Article 4 direction has been prepared for each of these conservation areas listed above and remove permitted development rights and allow features of historic value such as windows, doors or roofing materials within the conservation areas to be better protected on a case-by-case basis as part of the planning system. The directions, including the permitted development rights to be removed and the affected locations, were proposed in the draft conservation area appraisal document, but they did not come into force when the conservation areas were designated. If agreed by Cabinet, the directions are made and will come into force immediately, and the permitted development rights stipulated removed at the same time as the consultation begins. It is then required that they are confirmed by Council within 6 months of the consultation commencement date in order that they stay in force. I'll just make an observation that Daventry District Council made more use of Article 4 directions when considering their conservation areas than either SLC, SNC or NBC. And these proposals are consistent with that approach. As we move to a new WNC-wide plan over the next few years, the use of Article 4 directions in this context will no doubt be a discussion point for members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much indeed. We have one speaker here, which is Councillor Bob Purser. Bob, over to you.
Chairman, thank you. And I commend the work on these reports, the engagement with local communities and the skill that's gone into producing them. I think they're good quality thing. And we have some really beautiful villages and areas of our towns which need the active planning support that conservation area status gives. The question I have is that all of us, wherever we live, need to live in an area that's beautiful, that has a sense of history, is well cared for, and where we're consulted on the way forward. How do we make sure, the question I've got is, how do we make sure that the same level of effort goes into our urban environments, some of which face more stresses than some of the villages, more conflicting land uses, more kind of cheek by jowl activities? How do we make sure those areas of the district get an equal amount of consideration?
Yeah, Rebecca, over to you. Did
Okay.
you want to comment? I'm happy to as well, actually.
No, I think you absolutely got a point. I think it's very important that every community has a sense of place that people want to look after and care for. And in terms of as we move forward in the planning, that's a very, very important place to start. I think people will take pride in their communities if they're well designed. I know the government have a nationwide program of encouraging good design in planning going forward, and design codes will play an increasing part. I think you've made an excellent point, and I think we should all take note of it. And as we become a planning authority with our local plans, which will become over the years one planning policy for the entire district, something that we very much need to take note of in creating a sense of place that we can all take pride in. I think you're pushing to open door as far as I'm concerned. And I think that your reflection on the endeavours of the officers at DDC is noted, and thank you for that. Those officers are still in post, and we intend to take good practice wherever it occurs forward as an authority for all of us.
Thank you, Rebecca. There are, of course, conservation areas in the town, aren't there? We've got two speakers, Adam next and then Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. veterans of Daventry District Council will recall that I was quite vociferous and increasingly irate at times about our use of Article 4 directions, which I saw as rather overreaching and overbearing. So it's some comfort to me to hear the Cabinet members say that DDC did go further than the other predecessor councils in its use of Article 4. My question to Councillor Breeze would just be, simply because this process has been started under a rule book used by DDC, are we under any obligation to see this through to what feels to me to be seen as some sort of natural conclusion, rather than doing what I would view as the right thing, which is listening carefully to consultation responses, and if necessary, stopping the process before those Article 4 directions are imposed upon people, particularly in places like Weedon?
The consultation responses are, I think, all listed in the appendix, and where relevant changes have been made. I think it's up to the Cabinet. If they decide they want to stop the process, then it's entirely in their gift. But it is the end of the process. We are looking forward to our new planning regime. It's a question for the wider Cabinet, not just me.
Thank you, Rebecca. Comments, please. I think, is that Phil? Would you comment on that? Or?
Well, no, I was just going to say that I've been involved in conservation areas within the urban area of Northampton for many years. Yes, we've got our villages in Northampton which have conservation areas such as Hardingstone, Wootton, etc. But we've also got some important areas of the town itself, and it's right that we try and protect them, retain the character of them, and in order to maintain that environment that we all want to see, and that Councillor Purser talks about. And I think we've recently reviewed some of the conservation areas in Northampton before the end of April or beginning of April. And yes, I think there's a lot of good work's been done in Northampton over the years. I mean, the Barrack Road Conservation Area, for example, has helped to start enhancing that area. The area around the racecourse and Kingsley Road and all around there, and the area around Abington Park, we've been able to protect those areas from inappropriate development in the setting where they are, and also to impose Article 4 in order to retain the design of windows and things, for example. So a lot of good work's been done, and I would commend it. I would commend the work of our conservation officers. And yes, let's look and keep them all under review and do what we can. I think parish councils have a key role to play as well in this, and it might be worth talking to them at the Clerks forums that we have. So yeah, let's take it forward, Chairman.
Yeah, Stuart, you're going to make a point.
Just to come in with the boring policy stuff, Chair, and again, along with what has been said at the moment, there are a number of documents that we will be looking at as part of the local plan in terms of design, quality, in terms of master planning, in terms of any other guidance or policies that we need to look at those areas. Again, neighbourhood plans is something that, as Councillor Larratt and Councillor Breeze has identified, working with the local communities, working with the town and parish councils, that is one of the real opportunities that neighbourhood planning offers, is to provide that local context, the local voice, and that localism into what planning and the weight that has in terms of the committees going forward. So I'd certainly, if there's any support that you need for any of the areas to look at any of those opportunities, as officers, we'd be more than happy to sit down and help.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Bob. Rebecca, another comment?
Yeah, thank you. Just to address actually Adam's point, if we agree this report tonight, the Article 4 directions are made, which is a technical phrase, means it comes into effect, and we have to go out to consultation for 6 months before they're enforced. So that is a way forward, I think.
Okay, yeah, and that's the nature of the decision that the recommendations guide is too, isn't it? Yeah, in which case, I don't think we have any alternative suggestions. We'll press ahead and take a vote on the recommendations. Yeah, okay. If there's no further comments, Looking at the recommendations, just ask you to confirm your agreement to them, please. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Takes us, thank you, takes us back to Phil, and this is the Innovative Flood Resilience Project, which is a pretty exciting funding opportunity. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. The report outlines the Northamptonshire Innovative Flood Resilience Project. It's a bit of a difficult one to get your tongue around, but it's all about bringing approximately £6.2 million of grant funding, not into West Northamptonshire, but into West Northamptonshire and North Northamptonshire. So please, that 6.2 is county-wide. Mr. Chair, flooding is a real problem for residents and businesses. It's unpredictable, but devastating when it happens. People can be out of their homes for months or even years. So we want to make flooding happen less and be less damaging to people when it does happen. Our flood and water team led a project, the Oxford-Cambridge Pathfinder, showing how homes and businesses can be better prepared to face flooding. This resulted in a website, www.floodtoolkit.com, to help people prepare. This good reputation in Northamptonshire helped us secure the £6.2 million Innovative Flood Resilience Project, which in West Northamptonshire covers the Wootton Brook catchment area, and in North Northamptonshire, the Harpers Brook catchment area. The project aims to help on three scales. Catchment, working with landowners and farmers in the upstream areas to implement nature-based solutions, e.g. ploughing and planting in ways which help the land retain water for longer, so flood surges are reduced. Community, supporting communities to help themselves, for example, flood wardens, local ability to close roads, exercises so people are used to what to do if a flood happens. And thirdly, property, making individual properties more resilient in a flood if a flood happens. For example, floorboards at doors, water tolerant flooring and wall coverings. The project should be helpful for those affected in the two areas outlined in the north and in the west, but also useful for everyone across the country from the learning it produces. Funding is all from the Environment Agency. Apart from staff oversight time, it won't cost WNC anything. To unlock the main part of the funding, we need to submit a good business case by March 2022. We are working with a wide range of partners, especially the Environment Agency, but also Anglian Water, the local nature partnership, and so on. These partnerships should serve us well in the future. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a very worthwhile project. It doesn't resolve flooding or stop flooding. It makes us more, or will make the communities more resilient to it. It doesn't mean that we don't want to stop flooding in areas, but this is an opportunity to work with the community, with others, in order to make the everything more resilient. So, as I say, a worthwhile project with direct and indirect benefits, and it shows how good work and good relationships can make progress possible. And I commend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. It's very helpful. Our one speaker on this is Councillor Roberts. Emma. I haven't got you down, but did you speak after Emma? Yeah, please, no problem. And Finda. We did have you down. I was going to thank you for all the work you've done on this, but you can speak as well if you like. Sorry, Emma, over
No,
to you. That's got to be a promise. Thank you.
It's fine. Debate away, no problem. Thank you, Chair. The report's great and the concept is great, but as Phil is probably already aware, I'm disappointed that there's an area missing from the report. I believe that promises have been made through lead local flood authority visits to certain areas that have led them to believe that they were going to get a slice of this pie. And it would appear that Far Cotton is not going to get a slice of this pie. There'll be some arguments made, absolutely, that work around the Wootton Brook catchment area will have an impact on the flow into Far Cotton, and I'm sure that's something that Phil will come back and say, but that's not going to be any consolation to residents. The Pathfinder project did a lot of work in Far Cotton. I'm surprised it hasn't delivered anything here. I'm still waiting, many of you will know, on a full investigation into the flooding in Briarhill Walk in May. We still haven't got the information that we need around that. The actions that were required in the lead local flood authority reports back in 2019 have still not been implemented, and I would really like to see something in here or as part of that WNC are intending to do to ensure that things that the borough was supposed to do, the things that the county was supposed to do, are now integrated quite neatly into the unitary authority. The water courses information I've still been asking for since NBC days, still never received. Had a phone call to be told, never had them. Had a phone call to be told they couldn't be released to me. I couldn't have the information. That was from an officer, still not got those. So if they're not being fed into this, how has a decision been made that relevant areas in my ward are not going to get a slice of this pie? Hugely disappointed. I'd ask you to refer it back to try and get a different or a more detailed outcome as to why Far Cotton hasn't been considered as part of this report.
Phil, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, please don't think we don't underestimate the issue of flooding in Far Cotton, because it is a real significant issue, as it is in Yelvertoft and places like that as well. So, St James, we could think of no end. But as I said, this report isn't about alleviating flooding, stopping flooding. It is making communities more resilient. And it's where we can make communities more resilient, the better. This is an initial one-off start, perhaps to a much bigger process. I hope it is. But we needed to find somewhere where there are existing problems. And I think, I know Far Cotton regularly gets flooded. It's not as bad in some respects in the number of times it gets flooded in relation to the Wootton Brook. I wouldn't deny that Far Cotton floods, not necessarily as much as often as the Wootton Brook. So it has a real problem. And yeah, the issues around that really need to be addressed. You know, we thought we'd come up with an answer, and then Christmas Eve, last Christmas Eve, I was called out on Christmas Eve because of all the houses that are flooded off the Wootton Brook bursting its banks. So, you know, it is a problem, but this is about resilience. It's not about alleviating. Please don't think we underestimate the issues of Far Cotton, because we don't. We are still working on issues around that. And can I thank Councillor Shawan for all the work that she's put in on this, and the work she's done through the committee in securing this funding, because I know she's had a big input to that. And I would like to thank her for all the hard work she's done. Briarhill Walk, I was under the impression that that had reported come out, but I'll double check and we'll let you know if the outcome of that has been reached. I thought it had, and I personally thought I'd sent you that report. I wasn't supposed to send it to you, but I thought I had sent it to you. My apologies if I haven't.
Quickly, Chair, because I appreciate your time. I didn't feel so, by all means, share it when you're not supposed to share it again. Far Cotton residents are resilient. We're all for resilience. You know, we want to see this resilience implemented in the ward. So I'd like to see further consideration of any additional funding, and I'd still like to have a conversation about why this funding can't reach us at all.
We have our flood expert with us tonight, Simon Bowers. I don't know, Simon, if you want to add anything to what's been said.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Chow may also want to make a comment because she's been involved in the process. Essentially, it's a question of what this funding is for. As Councillor Loughton has said, this is about resilience. Yes, it may produce some mitigation, particularly the upstream work with farmers, but it's fundamentally about helping communities to be resilient. And of course, the learning is supposed to be shared. So Far Cotton, for example, should benefit from it. But the other reason why this catchment was chosen, along with Harper's Brook up near Corby, was because they're not suitable for the traditional grant and aid funds. There isn't at the moment a grant and aid scheme that looks likely to achieve support that would enable us to help Wootton Brook catchment, whereas Far Cotton is potentially eligible for grant and aid, and therefore a more permanent solution may be available for Far Cotton. So it's a question of horses for courses. We can get something which helps people of the Wootton Brook catchment through this scheme. We can help residents of Far Cotton and other places through different schemes. But even this scheme, as I say, because of the learning being shared, should be of assistance more generally.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Right, so two speakers. Julie, we're happy for you to make comment. Has it been covered by what Emma said? We've spoken about Far Cotton a bit there.
Well, I don't know whether you remember that once at the Borough Council, I did thank Councillor Golby and his team because when I had to call them out because we had some flooding in St Leonard's Road, luckily it didn't quite get into the shops. Now, I was told that Northampton County Council had money from government. Don't know whether it's the same. And I was told that Far Cotton was first on the list. So I don't know what's happened to that. And so obviously quite upset to think that with NCC, we were first on the list and now we're not. Now, I went to the Floodmobile and that was brilliant because talking about resilience, they had doors that stop flooding, they have barriers that stop flooding, they have flooring that's plastic that all you have to do is sanitize it when you've been flooded. They've got carcasses of kitchen cabinets that you can take the doors off, put them up higher, and it doesn't matter because, oh, and the walls, they've got these waterproof things for the walls as well. So it's brilliant. So we can all have good flood resilience, but the problem is it's quite expensive. So what I would like to see is for some kind of grants to help people, because in Far Cotton, Delapre, people are not rich. And so to be able to flood-proof your home is going to cost a few thousand. So, and also it's very green because the whole of my house at the bottom floor had to go because it was all contaminated. So it all went to landfill because no one could use it, and I had to buy all new stuff. The insurance company paid for it. Well, if I was flood-proofed and it couldn't get in my doors because they're these special doors, then we wouldn't have all of that problem, would we?
Okay,
It couldn't get in, and if it goes over the 4 foot or 3 foot, it can start to go in. But then if you've got plastic floors and walls, you can just sanitize it all.
Okay,
it's fine.
let's ask if there's any clarity around that. I think what Simon has just told us is very clearly the different purposes to which different money is put. And if there were money that under the NCC days looked like it might come Far Cotton's way, I'm pretty certain it would have done. Anybody throw any light on that, or do we need to do a bit of digging, Phil?
Well, I'll let Simon speak in a minute, but I just think that it's what the money's for, you know. Yeah, yes, I of course in a utopia world, we would do what the council said, provide grants for all these things, but we're not in that position, and I can't see that being something that happens in the near future. Although Far Cotton would be eligible for grants to alleviate flooding, whereas the Wootton Brook won't. But of course, the Wootton Brook, if we can work with farmers, if we can do things to slow down the Wootton Brook, that will slow the water coming into Northampton and through Far Cotton as well. So,
But the
so
problem-
it might
sorry.
help in that little way.
Okay.
But that's what we're talking about here.
No, I
Okay.
know, and I understand that, but when Councillor Roberts spoke about it, you said it was about resilience, so I would talk about resilience. But we have issues in Far Cotton that haven't been fixed for years, the drains, and I'm still nagging them for that. So there are things like that that money could be spent on, and we were promised it. Thank you.
If you've problems with drains, Julie, I'll come down and have a look at them, and I'm sure officer will come as well.
Okay. Right, so at which point we just asked Councillor Chowan to be as brief as you like. We thank you for all the help you do as our flooding champion, Pinder. Just a couple of comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make it really brief. Simon Bowers actually did cover some of the points that I was going to make, but I just wanted to clarify a point that Councillor Emma Roberts raised, which was around, the reason why this funding is just being allocated to this area. As you mentioned, I'm part of the RFCC Flood Board. And this community has never ever received any kind of funding or grants to help alleviate the flooding, but they've been impacted a lot of times. So we had to look at a way where they could actually get some flooding, and the only way was through flood alleviation projects. So this is probably the only kind of funding that they will ever get. So I just wanted to say that actually there is other funding available, and as part of the RFCC, that is something that I will raise. So if there is any funding grants that do become available for places like Far Cotton or Briar Hill or any of the other areas, we'll make sure that Northamptonshire does get their voice heard, and those areas are covered as well. So that's all I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Pinder. At which point then, I think if there's no further comments, can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations, please? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 16 has been covered. We're on to item 17. This one is with Malcolm. Reprocurement of facilities management contracts. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I think this is really a pragmatic paper to put before you all. And I think the arguments for extending these contracts are clearly set in the executive summary. And indeed, the options going forward, which are covered issues and choices in item 6. So if everybody's read the report, I would be saying no more about it due to the lateness of the hour. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. We do have two speakers, Councillor Roberts and Councillor Davenport. So Emma.
Thank you, Chair. 6.11 of the report talks about it not being feasible to bring matters or these items in-house. But it doesn't say what feasibility studies have been done, doesn't say what analysis has taken place to assess cost consequences of an in-house service, doesn't give you any of that detail. So it's very difficult as a member to see how we've reached this decision. 7.6.1 looks at the procurement process. And I wanted to ask whether or not those that are bidding for that procurement process and the climate impact, etc., will have to follow that as part of their bids, and also where the added social value elements are coming from. It is detailed in the report, but it doesn't say what we're going to add or achieve as a result of those. And whenever a report says a reason not to do something is because pension costs will be increased, really worries me, because generating income for residents of the area or workforce in the area, including a good pension and good future, I think is a positive, not a negative. So I wanted to add that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Well, any comments nevertheless, Malcolm?
Not on the pensions one, no, but I would comment that this is a pragmatic approach. That's why, and there's once we've because we've got all these contracts coming together, and pragmatism's got to prevail today. But I completely agree that we should be looking at all sorts of other options downstream, and sooner the better. But I mean, we've got what we don't want to do is to stop things working. That's really the issue of this here today. But thanks for your comments anyway. I've got no mind on the subject. But what I'm very keen to do is get the best option we can.
Thank you. Any further comments on that? Oh, sorry, Adam?
I'd just comment that we mustn't overlook the fact that all of these contracts, all of this expenditure is effectively investment in our local community. These cleaning contractors, the security contractors, every tendered contract that that this council puts out into the private sector is money in someone's pocket, and very often in the pockets of some of the less well-paid members of our communities. So I wouldn't want to see us rush to an ideological conclusion by bringing everything in-house for the sake of it. We have to follow Councillor Longley's approach of looking for best value, the best possible service, whether that be in-house or outsourced. But there are positives to outsourcing, and if it means that we get a better bang for our buck, if it means that we can save some money to invest in services elsewhere, then we're all the better for it, especially in light of the fact that we've just had announced a national insurance rise, which will impact upon this council financially. It is in effect a tax on jobs, a tax on employment, and it will mean that this council has to pay out more in the long run.
Yeah, I comment on that.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, please do.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be a rush to in-house or out-house, but the point being here is to maintain continuity in the short term, and that gives us the space to make informed decisions. That's really the point. That's where we are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, at which point would direct your attention to the recommendations? I don't see any further questions or comments. No. Can I ask for your agreement to the recommendations, please? Agreed? That's great. Thank you very much. Item 18 is with Lizzie, extension of 78 Derngate. This is through the approval of the funds for the Northampton Towns Fund. Lizzie, over to you.
Yep, okay. Well, you've all seen and read, I hope, the lengthy documents, particularly on the town investment plan. I'm sure that was scintillating for you all. So the report requests approval for the business case for the extension of 78 Derngate, otherwise known as the Charles René Mackintosh Museum. And what it's doing is allowing for a drawdown of the funds from the Northampton Towns Fund grant allocation. So the town was offered a deal, the town deal, in March 2021 to a value of £25 million. And that was one of the top payouts actually across the UK in terms of an offering from the government. And one of those 10 projects is 78 Derngate. And the ask, particularly towards this project, is 400,000. So in the theme of what we've been talking tonight, we're not talking a huge sum of money, and hence the reason why I'm not going to go through this in great detail, bearing in mind where we are now. And what it'll basically be an extension to the building, a nice glass atrium on the side, and also there's going to be a garden path walkway through to an area which was originally scrubland. So it's going to be an educational garden route. The Towns Fund and the implementation of the Towns Investment Plan is made up of a board of key stakeholders. You've heard me say this before: WNC, SEMLEP Chamber, Chamber of Commerce, the police, university, to name but a few. And basically the way it works is the government allocates the £25 million for the 10 projects put forward in the Towns Investment Plan. And then the funding is drawn down for each project at the appropriate time. And what the council needs to do is provide the assurance framework. And that process was approved on the 13th of July. So as you would imagine, the government, HM Treasury, would wish us to have a robust business case, which would be developed for each project. And this would consist of a strategic case, an economic case, a financial case, a commercial case, and a management case. So it's very in depth, and there's no room for error really on this one. The council used a company called Hatch Limited, and they were used as an independent appraiser of the business case process. So you can see here that this is actually very robust indeed. And it's, bearing in mind where we've come from in the past, this is really pleasing to see. So what happens is the oversight and delivery group look at the business case. And once that is signed off, it then goes on to the Northampton Forward Board, and then it comes here tonight for the final sign off. And then once it's signed off, the project will be undertaken and the money will be drawn down. And the project will be overseen by the Northampton Forward Board, and in particular this project strategic group. Just by way of information, the Borough Council had already put forward 200,000 in match funding in 2019, so they've already had that, but the total cost of the whole project is 900,000. So the museum has got to find some of that money itself, and it has that in its business plan, and it has a robust business plan itself as to how it's going to make this work. So economically, the benefits for the town are shown to be well worth the investment in this project. So you've got the strategic and economic, financial, commercial and management case. And from this, Hatch accredited a rating, which in this case for this project, one of many that we're dealing with at the moment, it's a green rating. And from that, you know that that means it's got a really good economic business case. So that's really about it, really. I'm just asking for your drawdown of the funds, and I think you'll think it's a no-brainer, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Just one comment from Adam, I think. Adam?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Just with my culture and tourism hat on, fully in support of this. We need to be investing in the highlights of our heritage across West Northamptonshire, and I look forward to visiting once this project is complete.
Thank you.
Thank you. This money can only be spent on this project, so therefore it's a governance issue that we therefore request you to approve that we make that transfer that money across. Just ask your confirmation, please. Thank you very much. Good. Takes us on to item 18, which is variation to agreement of the stable block at Delapre Abbey. That's with Malcolm. Malcolm, over to you.
It's a good news story. What it boils down to is the stable block.
Sorry, just microphone.
Sorry, folks.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm hoping you'll be in agreement. That's a good news story. What it boils down to is the stable block will be put in good use. It'll stop it deteriorating, and we actually get it improving the assets. So I'm asking for everybody to, and if you read through, you'll see what all the safety features regarding the legal side are. So I'll ask you all to please approve this. I've no more to say.
Any questions or comments? Yeah, ditto from Adam. Yes, okay, yeah. No, excellent amenity at Delapre, and this is a further enhancement, isn't it? I can't see any comments, so just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations. Agreed. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 20, which is local council tax reduction scheme. Again, that's with Malcolm. Malcolm,
Right, whilst we're on a roll, this is an interesting one. At the budget meeting for this financial year, we agreed that the rates that people would start paying, would have to pay for their council tax if they were in a position where they couldn't afford it, would be all put to the same level of 20%. That meant that the borough would come, I think it was 31% down to 20. Daventry would stay the same, 20, and South Northants, I think it was 8.5, up to 20%. So we were putting the same number. We had to do this, government forced us anyway, but we would have done it anyway. And this paper here says that's what's happened in this financial year, and looking for was agreement that we continue on at that rate in next financial year. That's the size of it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any comments at all? Any questions? No, Fiona, come on.
There's an element of it on the care leavers council tax reduction, which we did pass through at one of our previous meetings, but actually the logistics of the care leavers actually performing the tasks required in order to be able to gain access to the funding or not have to pay the funding proved to be beyond the reach of most people. So what's in the papers now is to simplify that, to make it one process rather than apply for 3 different things to get to the end result. So I think this will satisfy the need that we have much more practically.
Yeah, quite right, Fiona. And also there's some armed forces requirements, the same sort of thing. It's good news from that point of view.
Jolly good. Thank you. Further comments? No? In which case, again, can you just confirm your agreement to the recommendations, please? Is it agreed? Thank you. Takes us on to our last report for this evening. This is with Adam. This is proposal for capital funding to replace library management systems. Now, we have some private information on this. I don't know if we go into private, or it might be that if the Cabinet don't have any queries on it at all, we just accept that they've read the information and they're happy with it. Does that sound good to you, Catherine? Yeah, brilliant. So over to you, Adam.
Yeah, just to clarify that the reason for the information being on pink papers is because it defines the budget that we're setting, and we don't want to give an indication to the market that would possibly skew that procurement process that we will hopefully be undertaking very shortly. The proposition before Cabinet is relatively straightforward. We have an IT library management system which has associated hardware. That's currently part of a contract that ends on the 31st of March next year and can't be extended. The equipment that we're discussing is 9 years old and at the end of life, so we have to undertake a process to renew our IT systems for the libraries and put a new contract in place. That system will be future-proofed. It will also be procured with the potential disaggregation of the library service at a later date. However, I would stress that following discussions I had with my counterpart in North Northamptonshire just last week, there are absolutely no plans for us to do that. The library system works extremely effectively as a county-wide service because of the book stock and other factors that simply mean that it's better as a larger shared service. And I would hope that North continue with that, in that frame of mind. So essentially, we now need to re-procure for a new system and new hardware for all Northamptonshire libraries, and that includes the community managed libraries. Those of you who followed the libraries debate at Northamptonshire County Council will recall that some of our libraries were handed over to community groups. They no longer form part of the statutory service, which is council funded and council run in its entirety. So West Northamptonshire Council, as the hosting authority for the library service, will carry out this procurement process, and then North Northamptonshire Council will provide their allocation of the funding to the West once that's concluded. I'll just remind members, if we don't procure a new contract, we won't be able to provide the statutory duty to deliver, and I quote, a comprehensive and efficient library service, which is required by the Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964. So I put the paper before Cabinet and I hope to have their approval.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I think this is fairly straightforward. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Just going to check. Everybody's had the chance to read the more detailed information on the private papers. No need to go into private session. Are you happy, or would anybody like to do that? No. Thank you. In which case, we'll just again ask for your agreement to the recommendations of this report, please. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That was our last item. Thank you very much indeed for those who attended and those who managed to stay till the end. Very grateful. Thank you.